Hello there, I'm going to give you some commentary and thoughts on the Company of Heroes campaign. However, I'm also playing with the Blitzkrieg mod. What does that do? That's a pretty good question. Let's move on without answering it, because I don't even really know. For some reason, I couldn't find a feature list for this mod, despite it being massive and quite popular. But broadly speaking, it makes the game more realistic. We'll see as we go on. To begin the game, they went to the effort of making a shot-for-shot remake of Saving Private Ryan's opening. Well, you can see where they're going with this. It's another case where Company of Heroes is going to plagiarize all of its content from various films and TV shows, like in Company of Heroes 2, which I played somewhat recently. We start off storming the beaches, and really we don't have to do too much here because there's not too much we can do. You just run towards the right side of the screen and get absolutely annihilated by the machine gun positions. Because we're in the Blitzkrieg mod, these machine guns are much more powerful than they would have been in the original game. So we get annihilated. However, we have a seemingly unlimited supply of troops who are just swimming up the beach. As you die, billions of soldiers start to appear from nowhere, so that's quite useful. You just had to get 25 up to the end of the beach. Eventually, by sheer brute force, enough of them somehow survive the run and make it. Then we had to throw a satchel charge at a bunker. This was difficult because we were getting annihilated the whole time, but eventually somebody did it. And that conveniently deletes several of the enemies nearby and teleports a ton of your troops off the beach to behind the enemy's defenses. So from this point on, the mission is much easier. Although the entire mission's quite easy, because while you're up here, you still get an unlimited supply of new guys swimming up. So really, you don't have to worry about what's going on, you can just take unlimited casualties, the enemy can't, and you'll eventually brute force your way through the mission. This is a game that was designed with running up to the enemy out of cover in mind, because normally in Company of Heroes your guys are somewhat bulletproof, you can run into machine guns and things like that. However, in the Blitzkrieg mod, that's not so much the case, and that's going to cause us some issues as we try to work our way through the campaign with this sort of handicap, I guess, although it's a handicap we can apply against the enemy as well, of course. The next mission is now a Band of Brothers reference, the other big thing that the game takes most of its material from. We are now behind enemy lines before those landings we just saw, and as the mission starts we're immediately getting killed, because you're supposed to spawn not in range of those enemies, but everything has longer range in the Blitzkrieg mod. And we're also in this swamp getting shot immediately in poor cover. We wade over towards this fence, which, appropriately enough, increases our defense. And now we take advantage of the fact we're playing as airborne troops for this mission. They are very special. Normally, when somebody dies in a unit, there are various rules that you have to follow to get those guys back. For airborne troops, that's not the case. You can just sort of order more troops to be parachuted on top of you, and it happens really fast. So, we shoot our way forward, just constantly replacing our losses with new guys as we get annihilated, and somehow it works out. You might have noted, if you were looking very carefully at the start of this video, I'm playing on expert difficulty, for now at least. This is another classic game that does not tell you what the difficulty levels do, but we're going to start running face to face with what it actually does soon enough. Here's the first real bit of difficult gameplay we come across. We have to save some guys in a building, but it's surrounded by guys with light machine guns and indeed a heavy machine gun. And machine guns, as mentioned, are extremely powerful in this mod. Here's an example. You're supposed to be able in this game to do stuff like this, just run forwards and throw a grenade at the enemy. But no, we die in about 0.2 seconds after running out of cover. Or at least once they start bothering to shoot at us. So that's a problem. It's not so much of a problem in this specific mission, because you can infinitely call down new squads of aerial troops. So you saw there, I called one down right next to the enemy to start shooting on their flank. There's very little setup time once they land, so you just get right into it and start blasting. And with that, we take out the enemy. This, as mentioned, is a game where it doesn't tell you what the difficulty levels do. And my personal theory on this is that if the developer doesn't say what the difficulty level does, it probably does something stupid, or to put it another way, it does something cheap, in that they didn't put much focus into developing different difficulty levels. And this game is likely no exception. I couldn't find any information online that actually says what this does, other than different people speculating on what it might do and all contradicting each other. At first I thought it would be similar to Dawn of War 2, which I just played, where the difficulty makes the enemies have triple damage, and there's some element of that. Maybe they have roughly double damage, but more importantly they seem to be more accurate at long range in that you take damage in cases where normally you don't take any damage because the enemy are missing you. And we'll see that later because we're not going to be on expert difficulty the whole time. We had to ambush this convoy. We don't have any anti-armor weapons. Normally, as the game is saying, you're supposed to put mines down, but in this mod, airborne don't carry mines, so we can't do that. Fortunately, a heavy machine gun that we captured has armor-piercing capabilities, and that's another thing that I think the difficulty level affects. It appears to change what armor stops, effectively. So for example, small rocket launchers on expert difficulty can go through big tanks' armor, where normally shots ricochet off things with heavy armor and don't do any damage at all. And one example of that is heavy machine guns, which can damage light vehicles really quickly. Another thing that I suspect, but haven't confirmed yet, is that if you pick up enemy weapons, like this heavy machine gun that we have, it retains the difficulty level's damage bonuses. You might have seen a shot earlier in this video where I killed an enemy infantry unit immediately by firing a light machine gun at them. And I suspect the light machine gun, because it's an enemy one we picked up off the floor, has their damage bonus. And there are various other things like mortars, anti-tank guns and the like that we can pick up and use, and anecdotally they seem to be much more powerful than the ones you can recruit while you're playing on high difficulty. So I think there's something of a potential exploit going on there that I haven't explored in full. We complete the objective to take out a bunch of enemy vehicles on this road, and now they'll stop coming so we can focus on going towards the other objective, some anti-aircraft guns to take out. I got zoned off the main approach by the enemy's machine guns. While looking for a way around the back, I saw this moment. One of our guys runs up for a point-blank range rocket launcher attack, killing, by the looks of things, everyone except him, so that went pretty well for that guy. I think being at point-blank range is actually good with airborne troops because their carbine rifles fire really quickly, whereas the enemy have bolt-action rifles that fire slowly, and they have those accuracy bonuses, I suspect, anyway. So being so close that we both have really high accuracy kind of negates that, and then our higher rate of fire increases our DPS. Therefore, running up to be really close or parachuting new squads on top of enemy squads is kind of a good idea, I think. Bypassing the enemy's defenses here seems to pay off. We use our captured light machine guns to mow down all of the infantry off to the left here, and we captured an enemy mortar. We can now use that to blind fire towards the position we're supposed to destroy, without approaching from the south where the machine guns are covering things. And eventually we might actually hit this thing. The mortar has poor accuracy, and I think it's worse when you're firing at something you can't technically see as well. So maybe if we just keep shooting, we'll do it eventually. I'm actually dangerously close to losing some units here because I'm not microing the constant replenishment from the sky. We're also very close to our low population cap, so we can't recruit all the soldiers I need to fill out all my squads, unfortunately. Pop cap's going to be an issue throughout, and it is worth keeping units alive because they do sort of level up. I think the game doesn't do a very good job of even telling you what level units are, but they get little bonuses to various things for killing enemies. It does track how many kills they've got. That's the number roughly at the bottom in the center there. My master plan is foiled unexpectedly because a rifle squad spawns on top of my mortars. I thought at first maybe they can sneak through these woods somehow, but in retrospect, no, units can spawn in these missions. We'll see some more severe cases of this later on, but it means we need to get out of that little cubby because if we sit there, it will just happen again after some unknown period of time. I tried some stuff where I got this anti-tank gun to fire at the enemy's machine gun positions, hoping to kind of snipe them in a weird way because it has slightly longer range. This fails and we come to this. I'm making an infantry attack from the north, bypassing the enemy machine gun position even more. And while stationary machine guns can turn around, so in theory it can turn and shoot backwards at us if we come round this corner, I don't think the AI does that because it's a command you have to give in game for a machine gun to turn, and they're sort of programmed to just defend the direction they spawned facing. You can see our own machine guns aren't having much luck, so this is counter evidence to my claim that captured enemy weapons have some of their bonuses, because we're firing multiple machine guns at like 2 guys and just missing over and over. Eventually we get them and we have this squad here that suddenly appears under our control. They've actually been sitting there for the entire mission, invincible, and the enemy have been firing at them the entire time. I hadn't noticed something was going on. I thought it was just some off-map target they were firing at, but we get that unit and capture that position quickly with a suicide charge. Here's another example of the difficulty of advancing. When suddenly in the fog of war there's a machine gun crew, a mortar crew, and a light machine gun up there as well. As far as I remember, in the base game, you were permitted to just run at a position like that, and maybe you'd lose a guy. That's the punishment for playing poorly. Here, we can't really move at all, and we'd lose everything if we tried to attack. But, as mentioned, we can do this. We have some very accurate parachute dropping who do this banzai charge from above. They fall down upon the enemy into melee range, blast everything with the carbines, and also use the grenade there too, and that does solve this situation. The downside to this plan is you have to lose enough troops already to free up the pop cap to be allowed to do a parachute drop. And I guess these two things complement each other, so it's difficult to advance because you'll suddenly get hit by a burst of machine gun fire and lose half a squad, but that means you now know where the enemy are and you've freed up some space to drop guys behind their lines and get those kills. And if they die, well, just keep rebuying them. It's not quite obvious because I'm cutting so much. I'm constantly rebuying infantry. We're losing men all the time. In this mission, not so much of a problem because we have this massive income in resources and we can constantly replenish. So we're just brute forcing this mission effectively. We're still in the early game, so we're allowed to do that. We'll see some other examples later where it's not quite so easy. Here was me attempting to use my mortars to clear out enemies while they weren't firing at me from a distance. Unfortunately, the mortars are very inaccurate. They have this huge area the shots can fall in. However, in retrospect, I now know that's partially because of difficulty, I think anyway, because anecdotally, later in the game, playing on lower difficulties, mortars are way more accurate and more useful. So that's one thing we can vaguely say difficulty must do. It makes us less accurate, and I think it makes the enemy more accurate and maybe gives them more damage, or maybe gives us less health, I don't know. We move on to the final part of the mission after brute forcing this enemy fortified position. We have to use this position to ambush a convoy coming down the road. Normally you'd set up anti-vehicle mines to kill them. You can't do that in this mod, but you can build trenches. These are effectively portable buildings to garrison, and being in a building massively increases your defensive potential. And really this is the place to be because the changes the mod makes overall make defending way easier than attacking. If we're in cover, we're very unlikely to take any casualties, and in this case the enemy aren't even firing at us because they're getting annihilated so quickly. The short time to kill means defending is very advantageous effectively. Whoever shoots first has the advantage, so sitting still in great cover with the enemy walking at you, this is ideal. We're getting the enemy's experience here that they've had against me the whole mission. Unfortunately, in this game, you're usually attacking because we're the allies attacking the Germans. So we're not going to get to enjoy this very much. Let's take it while it lasts. They're getting obliterated. This is partially because this is the start of the game. They're coming at us with light trucks and half-tracks that die in 1 or 2 hits from an anti-vehicle weapon. And despite the inaccuracy I speculate that our weapons have, they hit often enough. Even the machine guns can do some damage to these light vehicles. Again, that could be because they're enemy machine guns for the most part that have a little bit of extra armor penetration from the difficulty. Well, we're just playing the game of guessing what's supposed to be hard, what's part of the mod, what's the difficulty level. Who knows why what's happening is happening at this stage. We're too far away from anything that could be called developer intention, but that's the reason I wanted to do this in the first place. I want to see, is the game even possible under these conditions? And here is where that question will come to the forefront. In the next mission, a Band of Brothers reference, we have to take a town. But the big caveat is we don't have a base. Our drops have stopped, so even though we're still playing as the airborne for this mission, we can't bring more guys down anymore. It's just the guys we have here, and this runs very counter to my strategy in the previous mission of constantly rebuying dead infantry. Now we need to stop and try to snipe the enemy at a distance and not run out or do anything too crazy as the base game would have wanted you to do. This is a problem for us because we have to advance to take a church, and between us and the church there are loads of buildings garrisoned with enemy riflemen and more guys just wandering about in the street. We end up effectively in a rifle battle. We're just shooting at each other, but they have more guys shooting at me, and the unknown advantage that the difficulty level gives them. And as it turns out, as we grind our way through them, we lose basically everybody. I still didn't know at this stage that I wouldn't be able to rebuy my troops, but it's becoming increasingly obvious. Tried a cheeky grenade throw to take out this machine gun. There's no way we're getting past that machine gun, and it's protected on its flank by tons of rifles inside the church behind it. We end up with one guy alive. I decided to try and do something clever. You can actually sneak over to the right hand side of the map and blow up this wall with a timed charge. This allows you to skip the first part of the stage and go into a later part of the level and potentially capture some more resources or something, I thought. However, there's a guy standing on the other side of the wall who instantly killed my guy. The mission was failed. So now we have to try it in a different way. I decided to be more careful. We're doing this building wars style. We can keep our troops garrisoned in buildings to be in heavy cover as much as possible. This hugely reduces your offensive potential because you can only shoot through the windows that face the enemy direction. So while we have tons of guys in this building, only 3 or 4 guys will be able to shoot towards the enemy. And we're just going to have a window war trying to shoot these guys out of these other windows. I've been upgrading my squads now with the regular Garand rifles. This replaces the carbine rifles and gives you a lower rate of fire but increased accuracy, perfect for trying not to die and gradually eking our way forward. You can see though, it's not a fast process. Even against one enemy in this window, we just miss constantly. And we have infinite ammo, so we can sit here and try it for a while. There we go, that's one squad dealt with. Only like 10 more and a few heavy machine guns to go. The most important thing to achieve was to kill the couple of guys in these back windows of the church, because if they weren't firing on the route around to the flank of the machine gun, then I'd be able to run in and maybe grenade the machine gun or shoot them down, which frees up the main route into the square and just generally makes life a lot easier and less suppressy. However, shooting guys out of that church is a slow process because there was only one spot in this nearby building that can fire towards the church, so we're just going to wait for this guy to kill them eventually. We're shooting a bit faster than they are, and I'm guessing the airborne units are elite infantry, so maybe they have higher innate accuracy in some way. But then of course there's the difficulty level, who knows how that's going to impact things here. Well, let's do the long story short because this took a long time. We did actually kill tons of infantry in those back windows since more and more came in to replace them. We had a few losses on our side as well, and we come to this situation. My plan was to have these guys go into the building on the right to distract the machine gun, while other guys came around to the left to throw grenades towards it. We didn't need to do that as it turns out because we actually killed the machine gunners before the grenade goes off. So in the end, I guess that worked out. Maybe I wasted some of my time. The problem is, there's another machine gun just across the road from that one. While they're firing on my infantry, I try to run around to its flank in this sneak attack, then throw a timed charge into the building with the last survivor of this squad. This works out surprisingly well. The charge goes off and kills most of the guys inside and takes out the machine gun. We end up finishing off the survivor, running to the church and capturing the enemy's machine gun. I then set it up in the church. This allows me to effectively finish the objective. All we need to do is kill the enemies near the church to complete this phase of the mission. This is done when we eventually snipe these guys from this anti-tank gun. After that, the church becomes a barracks and you can recruit from it and replenish units. So we are suddenly back in the game. We now have infinite troops once more, and therefore can brute force the mission and eventually get through it by just throwing our infinite supply of soldiers at the enemy. The question that's going to come up though is whether that's actually a good idea, which we'll talk about soon. It's going to be a bit hard to demonstrate where I'm going with this in this format. Well, basically, stuff like this begins to happen. We need to go around this corner, but there's a sniper, some rifle troops, and a machine gun watching the crossroads. So we just die instantly and run away. And then we go back to the slow way of doing things, because you can't necessarily brute force your way through a situation if you're just not doing any damage. So when the enemy are too built up in an area, we have to try and do things a bit more sneakily, and we start to get exploit vibes. For example, I can gradually blow up the building the sniper is in, and the AI can't move the sniper. In this case, I ended up getting bored and charging forwards with 2 squads, thinking they can't kill us all, and indeed they didn't, and blew up the sniper. We then outflank the machine gun, and again the AI can't turn the machine gun while it is possible. We lose a bunch more guys because rifle troops were covering that machine gun position. So we lose most of the troops we attack with, but it gets done. The survivors go on to capture all of the top of the map where there were no enemies for some reason, so that was handy. But the fact I'm rapidly cutting between these moments betrays the truth of the situation. All of this took forever because it takes quite a long time to re-recruit troops. Well, I say quite a long time, it takes like 1 to 2 minutes, which is a long time when you're sitting there not doing anything waiting for it to happen, and you're doing that over and over again. And that's where the problem begins to seep in. We are advancing, now pushing to the east as well, and gradually mortaring and snipering the enemy's static positions, and occasionally you just get moments like this where our mortar team here was moving to a good looking position and then suddenly died. I don't know how, but I think it's a sniper in that building on the left killed them both with 1 shot. We can't see snipers because they're invisible, but the buildings they're in have a red health bar indicating that there's something inside the building, so that gives it away. We gradually build another mortar, move it up, blow the building up, then get the mortar to fire at this static position, unlocking another bit of the map we can move into without dying instantly. The mortar shells aren't especially effective, as you can see. Takes a while to work our way through them, but by using the mortar bombardment ability, which costs some resources to use, we can shoot loads at once and blow everything up. This guy does a quick death dance and dies after deciding he's probably been killed by that. So great, now we can move forward a little bit, or so I thought. I also built this airborne headquarters, a building I think is unique to this mod. We can't use it for anything though, because you need the rest of your base to do anything with that. So we have to go into this town square and, well, we start doing it the slow way, advancing behind buildings, staying out of line of sight, getting the enemy in line of sight and exploiting the fact that AI just sort of stands there, and gradually mortaring them to death. The mortar shells will eventually hit everything there. But then when I wanted to go into the square, there's an enemy mortar, there are buildings garrisoned with rifle troops, and the big building has a heavy machine gun that immediately suppresses and starts killing our troops. So we have to fall back, and that was that. Again, it's difficult to get across when I'm cutting everything, but it took about 1 hour to get from after us capturing the church to get to here. It really is a slow process when you're constantly looking around a corner, getting shot, and then going back to where you were before. The mortar team dies annoyingly, and that, all of a sudden, became the last straw. Again, I think it's hard to get across how annoyed I was with this, but it was really unfun to advance, combined with the fact that our victory did seem to be inevitable. I thought we would eventually get through it, but it was too annoying to actually do it. What I ended up doing is leaving that as a save, and coming back to the start of the stage. This time, I'm on easy mode. What I wanted to see is, what does easy actually do? Is it easier? The answer appears to be, yes, it is easier, so that's working, I guess. Our troops straight up didn't die as I charged forward. So the enemy are either doing less damage, are hitting less often, or probably both. Again, any game developers out there, why don't you just tell us? That would be nice to know what the difficulty levels actually do. Well, it appears to be easier. We absolutely obliterate all of the guys in front of the church, and in fact it went so well with so few losses I thought this is ridiculous. I switched back to see what normal would be like now. You might note, by the way, that I was complaining about the mission taking too long. Now I'm literally doing the mission again as a distraction from continuing the rest of the mission. I was right at the end as well. This is just some fun hypocrisy from me. It's taking too long, so let's make it take an hour longer by replaying the stage on different difficulty levels for some reason. Well, here's normal. Normal felt a bit more, well, normal. You lose a few guys for doing cheeky things when you run around a corner, but you still are alive enough to throw a grenade or maybe grab a few kills. Well, it's not quite how the game was intended to be played because of the mod, but it felt a bit more gamey, so I quite liked this. In fact, I thought it was a bit too easy, but we did make it to the church without losing everybody this time, with a couple more guys alive than on expert difficulty. I wasn't quite satisfied in the masochistic way. I quite liked completing the objective with only like 1 or 2 guys left alive. Well, we're stuck on normal now. I decided, you know what, I'm just going to play the whole stage real fast. And this time I took no prisoners. I realized we can just get somebody to have line of sight on the enemy's positions, plop a sniper down on the edge of their range, and gradually kill everybody. Basically, it's an exploit, although I think it's an intentional exploit. The AI deliberately doesn't do anything in this mission. They just stand there and will fire at you if you come into range, but if you don't, you can just fire at them. I made a serious attack from the back with a couple of mortar crews and blew up their mortar, and because we're on normal, I can stand there while being shot by the enemy's rifle troops, and I still have enough alive time to cheekily put down trenches and just get up to antics. So it feels a bit more open-ended when you're on normal difficulty. It's still annoying to face their machine guns, they'll still kill you, but it's not instant. You usually have enough time to get back out of the machine gun's range and only lose 1 or 2 guys. So it's less punishing, and that saves some time. And it feels better because while being punished isn't technically a punishment because you can infinitely respawn all of your guys, this way we don't have to wait for that to happen. So we've got a sort of shortcut by playing on normal. It's effectively the same difficulty, it just takes less time. And that's what I'm all about, really. Well, we'll see how that develops. We end up facing this armoured car in the middle of the town that shows up. This was a problem because we don't have anything that can really deal with it. The heavy machine gun can't penetrate its armour. They're also coming at us with infantry, but you might note I've put these trenches all over the place, just idly building them because I could. I had this vague memory in the back of my head also, that there was part of this stage where you had to defend the town against a big counter-attack, so I'd been putting down trenches basically everywhere, kind of half remembering I'd need to use them for something. I didn't quite remember that correctly, but I sort of did also, as we'll see in a sec. We eventually bring down the small counterattack that ends this mission when somebody with a rocket launcher takes out the armoured car. And then it turns out the main counterattack you're supposed to fight is actually a different mission. Sort of, anyway. It's a continuation of Mission 3 that's just called Mission 4, but you can't change the difficulty. I was actually going to change it to hard because I wanted it to be a bit harder after it all went too well that second time doing the current on mission. Well, we're back on the same map, with the same setup. Everything we did last time is still here, and that includes putting trenches in, so you can see the cutscene is forced to deal with the fact there are now trenches all over the map and these guys are going in and out. The vehicle's having a bit of a hard time there too. The best bit is this jeep that comes in at the top. Just as it's about to nosedive into our trench, it cuts away, so it looks like they got away with it. Well, the soldiers are getting drunk, ready for action, it's all going well, but they are then shocked when this error message comes up to leer down at them. Very scary indeed. It's also joined by Captain Nobody, who is here overseeing operations in this zone. He walks off. Well, I suppose they can't shoot him if he doesn't have a body, he's harder to hit. It's all going well for the airborne regiment. Well, now's the actual defense part of this mission. Ordinarily, you would be allowed to put down anti-vehicle mines like in that other airborne mission, but again we can't do that. So they're going to come at us with a load of tanks and we need to somehow stop them. I put down loads of anti-personnel mines, thinking that that might do something at the very least. Here's what it does. At the very start, a tank just drives on in, completely obliterates all of my wire and anti-personnel mines, and it does roughly nothing. Those explosions are so big, it looks like it should do something to the tank. It takes half damage from a rocket launcher hit, and then we can finish this one off using these engineers with a flamethrower. A flamethrower does very slowly melt tanks down and destroy their parts, so that works out okay. We also do have 2 anti-tank guns. One of them is over here, and it just about stopped this enemy tank from driving past it by the looks of things. Even when they do get past, it's not that bad really, because only infantry can take the building we're supposed to defend. So the tanks seem to be scripted to just sort of come here and support the situation. But once they're done driving towards us, they stop, and as it turns out you can sit there gradually killing them with flamethrowers, so that's all good. Here comes another one. I wanted to see if anything bad happened when it drove over my guys in the trench. Looks like it doesn't. That's pretty realistic, I guess. We almost killed that thing with the anti-tank gun, but again it's got past. But again it will just go and park somewhere and not do anything. The bad news is that it turns out the engineers with the flamethrower can kill themselves with the flamethrower. There is self-friendly fire damage, a rare thing in RTS on these flamethrower units, so we lose half of them to take out that tank. And there goes the other one. All the enemy infantry, by the way, just died instantly when they tried to cross the bridge, because entrenched guys with a few submachine guns will annihilate infantry running at you in this Blitzkrieg mod. However, the enemy have off-map artillery that takes out all of our trenches, and eventually it goes after the town hall we're supposed to be defending, and this changes the objective effectively. We lose about half of our stuff and have to now go and defend that church from earlier instead. That's not so bad, because I'd already super fortified this area during the long time I spent preparing for this part of the mission in the last mission. So essentially, we have tons of entrenchments ready to protect the infantry, and they don't die when the tanks come and start shooting at them. And we have a few anti-tank guns and rocket launchers to take out the enemy's tanks. Their infantry, if they do show up, will just die instantly, so that's all fine. And then the final part of the mission, it gives you a few tanks of your own, and you have to capture the town again by taking out the enemy's tanks and just generally not dying too much. There was also a secondary objective to grind for kills and take out more infantry, but I didn't bother going for that. These Shermans aren't especially good, but they are just about able to take down a Stug 2-on-1 with one guy tanking and the other guy outflanking. What we need really is a tankier tank that can deflect the enemy's frontal attacks while somebody else does the flanking. I'll talk more about that sort of thing in a later tank-based mission. For now, here's the next mission, and this one is the first of what I would call the real missions, the mission that really brings in the game's central mechanics fully, where we're going to be doing base building and have an actual battle against the AI. First though, there's this section of the stage where you just have to get to the middle of the map and rescue some guys before you progress. We get given tons of tanks to do it with, and that's fine. However, I had now put the difficulty back onto hard, and you can see these anti-tank crewmen are annihilating my infantry. We're back in the realm of dying very fast, and I immediately realise what's probably happening is something similar that happened to me in Dawn of War 2 recently. That the hard difficulty is much harder than normal, and then the next one up, expert, is only slightly harder than hard, so there's a gigantic gulf. In Dawn of War 2, it was triple damage if you increase the difficulty above normal. It's probably something similarly drastic going on here, because our infantry just die immediately in combat against the enemy's weaker infantry units. What I essentially did for this part of the mission was just drive around with the tanks, taking advantage of the fact that the enemy's anti-tank guns never rotate, so if you drive carefully enough, you can dodge any anti-tank weapons and just take out the infantry, well, slowly anyway. You can see here I was getting frustrated that this Sherman couldn't take out this mortar team right in front of them. I was going to go in with the anti-mine flail, thinking maybe this will take them out, but they actually just randomly got shot by something anyway, just as they went in to do it, thus spoiling my fun. How mean of them. We have trouble, generally speaking, just taking out enemy infantry units with our armor, because the armor isn't very good, and I don't know to what extent this is how the game's meant to be. Maybe tanks aren't supposed to be good against infantry because they're not anti-infantry units per se. Well, we spend a very long time fighting with various enemy things, and we'll take a look at a few moments here where it began to get a bit frustrating. This might be something to do with the difficulty level, but again, having played on normal, it's a bit like this on normal as well. We've got a Sherman at point-blank range firing its machine gun into this enemy machine gun crew. A lot of the tracer shots appear to be going through the models, so I guess it's doing damage, but not very much. Maybe we have 1/3 damage instead of the enemy doing triple damage like in Dawn of War 2. Again, back at it again with that difficulty speculation. I don't know why what's happening is happening, but it's bad, that's all I'll say. My big, expensive tanks can't take out the enemy's infantry even when outmaneuvered and at point-blank range. They also have a heavy machine gun crew in my base that took out all of my engineers and initial infantry units, so that wasn't going very well. I eventually dispatched these guys by building some engineers and really quickly running behind them before they could start shooting after setting up the gun. Then we can fire at really close range and take them out. So I mentioned earlier this is the first real mission, and this is the sort of thing I'm talking about with this. It's a mission where the enemy is actively building units like you can. They also have infinite resources to throw at you. It was an interesting kill. I ordered my tank to take out this mortar crew, and it just ran them over. I thought it was quite clever that the AI did the sort of thing that normally a player's micro might be required to achieve. Anyway, as I said, throughout this mission, the enemy will actually be building units from their own base and coming at us. It's a more fair engagement in that regard. There is also a gauntlet of preset enemies to kill on the way through the map, but they'll be constantly coming at us with stuff. It's more fair, as I said, and it's more gamish. It also made things much more difficult, as you might imagine, and it begins to bring us to a sort of stalemate as we go on, but we'll talk more about that. I ended up setting up stationary machine guns to defend my base to deal with the enemy for now. There was a little cutscene that showed a bunch of tanks coming onto the map and driving through these walls. This is going to be one of the objectives in the mission. They're going to come at us with loads of these panzers, but a finite amount. The enemy effectively doesn't have the tech to make really good units to throw at us, so we're okay in that regard. But curiously, those panzers start at really low health, as you can see here. And I thought, is that because of the mod? When they drove through the wall in the cutscene, it actually damages the tank and they've lost health as a result. Not sure if it's intentional, but the AI can deal with this as it turns out. Many of the tanks come at us with more health than that, and in our first encounter with one, we can see an engineer crew actively repairing it during the combat. Not the sort of thing I would have expected the AI to be able to do. It feels like a very player-only thing to remember to repair your vehicles, but they are on top of things, and I thought that was quite impressive. We are able to vaguely stabilize the situation and keep the enemy out of our base for now by setting up machine guns and an anti-tank gun. That gives us a bit of breathing room, but we still don't control much of the map, so we don't have the resources we need to pump out the infinite supply of things at the rate at which we're losing it. So we don't have the momentum, and it's going to take a while to get it back. I got the situation in front of my base under control, but they just kept coming at me from the back. I think what the AI is doing is moving down the right side of the map and then sneaking along the back edge close to our base to attack here. And having just one infantry squad in your base is really annoying because they lock you down. They blew up one of my jeeps there. Luckily I've got a sniper hanging around who will eventually kill all of them, even if my engineers hiding in the buildings won't really do it very well. I eventually got this Stuart light tank out. One thing I'm missing in this stage is more Shermans, more regular tanks. And I think that's because I straight up didn't realize you needed to build a tank depot to recruit them. For some reason I thought they were built from the motor pool building, which builds those Stuart light tanks that are getting destroyed by the enemy's panzers easily. So, as a result, we're not going to see me use any Shermans in this stage. I think I discovered it literally right at the end as the mission was ending, so that was good. And it's going to make my life a lot harder because not being able to deploy tanks like you're supposed to in this mission means it's very difficult to advance. The enemy's tanks are hard to deal with as well because our infantry can't be upgraded with bazookas this time. What we can do is this: hope the tank gets distracted looking the other way and have an engineer very, very slowly set up building demolition charges right next to it. A little bit ballsy, but seems to be doing the job. Not sure why this tank is just sitting here doing nothing. We escape and detonate the thing. It actually doesn't kill the tank, which was disappointing, but it almost does, and the engineer's flamethrower does a bit of damage as well, disabling its engine here, I think. All good stuff. We're somehow hanging on. This machine gun in the middle of the map is doing a lot of work, clearing out the enemy's constant infantry advances. I eventually supported with some more infantry and an anti-tank gun, because some armoured cars were coming out as well. I spent most of the mission effectively trying to push to the top of the screen in this shot. That little courtyard had an enemy barracks in it in one of the buildings, and we just fought at this spot for about 1 hour in my recording, so this was a very slow process, mainly because I can't kill them particularly fast, possibly because it's on hard difficulty yet again. We do eventually take out all of their tanks though, and they can't make any more of those panzers, so it's only armoured cars we face in terms of vehicles from now on, and not very many of them. It's mainly infantry and anti-tank infantry. Had a few of my own armoured cars, which are going to be very much at risk, and any infantry advances I make, well, they go roughly like this one here. Let this represent what happened in the back and forth of that hour. Every time I got near their courtyard, there was a light machine gun or a heavy machine gun or some garrisoned infantry who just shot my guys down. I eventually pummel my way forwards using a couple of mortar teams, or one for now, eventually moving up to 2, and I do take that area, but by that time the enemy seemed to have cottoned on to me mostly being on the right hand side of the map and started attacking down the left. There goes one of my armoured cars, one hit kill on those things to the enemy's infantry anti-tank teams. Very dangerous. Well, we've secured this area at last, and the good news is that the next area along is their main production area where their buildings are located, so if we take these guys out, the enemy's counter-attacking rate will descend greatly. There was a tank and a heavy machine gun crew in there, so we can't actually go in, but we can sit outside and gradually blow everything up with a mortar team and take out the buildings as well. We had a machine gun in their gate to kill any infantry who came out, and the rest of the map has been locked down by a couple of infantry teams, anti-tank guns, and a sniper right in the middle. So things have finally stabilised. I then sat back and bombarded the base for a full 10 minutes before finally going in. There was a load of infantry and a couple of mortar teams left over in here, but we captured this enemy MG42 and mowed everything down while they just sort of stood around over here. They weren't being very aggressive for some reason. Handy. So we've cleared out the enemy's main base. Now things are going to be more one-sided. It returns to being effectively a gauntlet of exploitative advances where we just take out the remaining static troops trying to stay out of their line of sight. They were, though, still able to counterattack because units again were just spawning into the map. Luckily I discovered one of the spawn points, this dirt road, and happened to have a machine gun here the first time the enemy spawned. So we can just lock this corner down and anything coming in can be killed instantly. Meanwhile, everybody else advances. Here was a nice trick. There was this really cheap vehicle you could make, the rocket jeep. And I thought, let's try it out on this church. It actually proves to be pretty good. You can use it as a long-range bombardment weapon from out of the enemy's range, and we blow up all of the infantry in that church right away. Good stuff. That allows us to capture the left-hand path of the road. The goal is just to take one of the sides of the map effectively, get at least one road going all the way through. This point that I wanted to take was completely covered in enemy infantry for some reason. They're very poorly defending that area. And more enemy infantry are marauding about, once again making a play on our base late into the mission. I had an armoured car back here because I suspected something was going on. I spotted enemy movement near some of my other control points. And that armoured car has the 50 cal upgrade that allows it to be very good against infantry, conversely to the extremely poor performance they have without that upgrade. The regular machine gun they come with just sucks for some reason. My mortars and a sniper cleared out the infantry on the road and we capture said road. Then the final objective is to get a few AI-controlled vehicles to the end of the road safely. The thing is, there are mines on the road. You see that blown-up Sherman husk right there? That's when I finally worked out how to build a Sherman, and sending it to the front line, it just blew up immediately, driving over some enemy mines. We've got the minesweeper engineers who can detect the mines. Sometimes it pops up on the left saying mine detected, but you can't see them after they've been detected for whatever reason, so the game kind of knows that you know they're there, but they don't show up as something. And what I was worried about was that the AI vehicles would just drive over the mines anyway. I don't think they do, and luckily enough, only one vehicle has to make it through to complete the mission, so that works out fine. Bringing us to the next mission. With some more Band of Brothers references, we are attacking Cherbourg at the northwest end of the Cotentin Peninsula. However, it is defended by this legendary warrior. He doesn't have much equipment, but he does have belief. He points his invisible gun at us and makes a loud banging sound from his mouth, and sure enough, that does the business. This is true power we're facing. Well, we're going to have to deal with that somehow. So for this mission, it's another offensive mission, but it's not quite a real mission, quote-unquote, like the last one, in that while the enemy has a couple of base buildings, they don't really come at your base or do anything, so it's just another gauntlet. There are just billions of entrenched enemy positions to gradually get through, and we should do it eventually because we have infinite resources. We deal with that sniper early on, then we have to push into this nearby area to set up our own base. I should note that from this mission, or maybe it was the next mission, I put the difficulty all the way down to normal. I finally surrendered, simply because that last mission took about 2 hours, and I just wanted to be able to shoot the enemy and have them die in a sort of normal way. Well, as we just saw, that heavy machine gun crew was surviving being shot quite a lot still, so maybe it was the next mission. But at some point, the quote-unquote intended balancing will be in effect, although with the Blitzkrieg mod, that's out the window already, so I'm really just talking nonsense. We are blessed this day, though, to have unlocked the Sherman Crocodile, the ultimate unit, because it allows you to not have to spot enemy machine gun positions and then gradually mortar them to death, which is a several minutes long process. The Sherman Crocodile just drives up to a building and kills everybody inside instantly. So having to move through an entire city full of garrisoned buildings is much less of a nightmare than I thought it was going to be at first once this Crocodile comes into play. We still get annihilated every time we walk around a corner and a machine gun fires at us, but maybe a bit less because the difficulty is low. The Sherman Crocodile can deal with most things unless they have a rocket launcher, and we have also now quote-unquote unlocked the ability to use some more powerful units, and I say unlocked because I'm mostly referring to me noticing that you can build these units. I don't know if we had the option before because I wasn't paying close enough attention. In my defense, in this mod, sometimes when you click on a building, there's a little button that says something like show additional options, and you have to click on that to reveal the full suite of things that it actually can build, and certain powerful units are behind that menu. Plus, certain things can only be built from certain locations, like this. The howitzer can only be built from field barracks, which are different to normal barracks. A field barracks being a captured building that you've upgraded to be a field barracks. Well, anyway, we've got some new toys in this mission and I'll be showing them off. As for what we're actually doing, we just had to push up towards this bunker at the end of the first bit of the map where the enemy were constantly spawning troops from. Taking that out will allow us to get some naval support. It plays a cutscene showing the naval support happening, but as far as I can tell, nothing actually happened in the mission, and you can't ask them to fire again, so that proved to be underwhelming. It didn't really help. Well, that's one part of the map secured at least. We can drown our sorrows by unlocking the regular artillery support ability. You just spend some currency to blow up an area, but that area has to be in your line of sight. Luckily, I could see the choke point we have to move through next that's defended by tanks and infantry. Might as well soften it up while I start building up my own tanks. There was one of our new toys, actually a special version of the Sherman. Looks like the artillery took out most of that infantry, and with fewer light machine guns we could move our own infantry up. But I wanted to try out this new toy. This is the anti-tank version of the Sherman. The normal Sherman just dies in 1 or 2 hits to enemy tanks. It's not that useful. But the big gun version of the Sherman, the upgunned version, can do the same back to them. And this immediately starts getting the business done. Another new unit I've discovered is the Tank Commander, a guy you can garrison into tanks to buff them in certain ways, and I think the buffs are mainly things like fire rate and accuracy. And that's a bit of an issue because we don't really need that. What we need is the tanks to not die instantly when they get attacked. Luckily, we're facing some light infantry here who can't kill them, so here we're invincible. We can set the building on fire to kill the guys inside, and the 50 cal machine guns make them somewhat able to kill the guys out in the open. But there's a Stug around the corner that takes off most of our health, and then the big tank blows up because a Panzerschreck or a Panzerforce rocket came from the background. And that's the annoying thing really. You spend a lot of resources and time, perhaps more importantly, getting a tank up to the front lines, and it can just die instantly going around a corner like that all of a sudden. Well, we're going to fall back on our mortars and howitzers to deal with this situation, well, our off-map artillery actually, as well as the howitzers. We can blow up all of the enemy's anti-tank stuff sitting here handily. The anti-tank gun they had wasn't facing the only direction I can approach them from, so a bad setup from the AI. That allows me to sit here with the Sherman Crocodile somewhat safely because the AI usually doesn't bother to rotate its guns. I riskily take down that anti-tank trooper with the machine gun, and with that, we break into the next part of the map. Here, well, things slow down a bit, and I thought I would focus on this random clip I selected to demonstrate that things are actually slow despite the fact I'm editing this down. Just making any progress in the missions takes a long time, and I think that's what I don't like either about this game or about the mod. I can't tell which one's more responsible, probably the mod. You die so fast to everything that there's a huge cost to advancing. And every time we advance a few inches, we have to stop and repair broken engines and restore health to avoid having to rebuy units, and rebuying them probably takes less time actually, so I don't know if that's a good idea. Looks like I spotted a Stug just doing nothing down there, so the artillery can deal with that. But generally, we're sitting around doing nothing in most of my footage of these missions. Here's an example of how far we got before I stopped again. We drove about half a screen south of that location before our main tank got immobilized, and we had to wait for the engineers to gradually repair it again. A very slow process. Luckily, the gun is still active and we can take out the half-tracks that the enemy is constantly building down here. They had a small base, but it turned out once we were past the first couple of anti-tank things, there were no more anti-tank things, so the Sherman Crocodile went in and blew the base up by setting everything on fire. Then we go to the north, we get lucky here, rounding a corner and getting the first shot against that Stug. This does help out because the nearby warehouse was an enemy motor pool in disguise. They were supposedly building things here as well. And now that we've captured this area, we can build things at the front line. So that saves some time, but speaking of time, we suddenly were given a time limit of 2 minutes to push to the end of this section. Normally I would advance much slower than that to make sure we weren't going to run into anti-tank things. Well, we just ran into them. We actually somehow survive. Our Sherman almost dies but doesn't, and the crocodile runs in and sets all of the enemy's infantry at the end of this pier on fire. There were some anti-tank infantry, but they just happened to not be able to fire, so we survive. The issue is that what it's trying to get us to do is destroy this one building in particular, and fire doesn't damage buildings very much anyway. It mainly just kills units garrisoned inside of buildings, so getting that far with just the crocodile wasn't enough, and it says they're going to demolish something. I thought this might be bad. Turns out it's just various props around the map explode and you don't get a medal for not doing it fast enough. Oh well. Now here we have to pour one out to this mortar team. They got glitchily stuck on that building and had been sitting there for most of the mission. I thought, oh, I'll just play without that unit, but I actually needed to kill them now so that I could get the pop space to build an engineer unit so that I could repair the immobilized Sherman, which takes up tons of pop space itself, and gradually get back into the fight. We can't advance because there's a guy with a rocket launcher on the road I need to use. In this case, because they're just standing there, we can still kill them, albeit the slightly slow way. We get the mortars and the howitzer to fire in their general direction, sit back and wait for them to die, and the AI, again, isn't very reactive. When you start bombarding an area, it won't get the troops in the area to move or anything like that. They'll just stand there. So if you happen to kill all of them, that's fine, and if you don't, you can fire at them again. Gradually, you will make progress. We're going to stop complaining about how slow it is now, and generously cut to the end when something strange also happened. The objective was to blow up this building in the top corner of the map, or so I thought. We blow it up and the objective marker goes away, but the mission doesn't end. I thought I'd encountered a glitch here and that perhaps it was just because of the mod. There's some script that's not running and we can't get out of this mission. After a long time trying various things, saving and reloading the game and running about all over the map pointlessly, I realized what we had to do, or I discovered by accident I should say what we had to do. We were supposed to destroy the Axis HQ, and I thought maybe I just need to destroy everything else that's kind of near it as well to make it count. And the answer is yes, you just had to blow up the other empty buildings nearby to officially destroy all of the Axis HQ. The actual building highlighted by the objective marker was just one of them, and I suppose it's supposed to be the last one you kill since the objective marker goes away once you take it down. Very confusing, but we get through it. And the reward for our perseverance is the capture of many pairs of enemy legs. Those will go a long way to helping our war effort, no doubt. So we march the legs out of the ruins. I guess the bodies were crushed by the ruins or something in the lore. And that's that. Now we move on to another airborne night mission like the one we saw earlier. This one, though, is a bit different and is substantially harder. Most importantly, you can't constantly recruit new airborne units from the sky this time, although you can replenish the units you have. So we start with 3 units. As long as they don't all die, we can get them back, a Total War style setup. At first we had to capture this point that's right in front of us as we spawn, and I thought that's easy enough, but it isn't for several reasons. The AI is playing pretty well. They have infantry running up to meet us here. They're not just standing around this time, and the infantry are actively setting up on these stationary weapons nearby. In the last airborne mission, the anti-air guns around the map were a target, but they didn't fire at us. This time we also have to take out all the anti-air guns, but if you get close to them, they actually turn and start firing at the infantry. And they're just as effective as the heavy machine gun nearby at killing us. So there I am, losing most of our stuff right away. I tried to run away and ended up with 1 squad still alive. We're not allowed to throw grenades in this mission, but instead we have demolition charges, and we can use those to blow up bits of this wall, so we don't have to enter this enemy base through the main gate. The goal, by the way, is to get in and blow up a rocket launch site. I started sneaking around with this squad, constantly re-recruiting its lost members. We can sort of hide in these little alcoves where nobody's going to have line of sight on us for a bit and we can get our troops back all the time, then pop out and start firing at stuff. This isn't very productive because, as I later learned, the enemy have a completely unlimited supply of riflemen that spawn not just from barracks buildings but from various edges of the map and from towers on the map as well, so there are enemies everywhere. My grand plan was to grab this mortar, because when you take a weapon, your unit splits, so we can make a mortar team and then re-recruit the lost section of the airborne team, thus kind of recruiting units in the mission by using these pieces of equipment. Plus a mortar will allow us to take out nearby enemy machine gun emplacements and free up our mobility. This doesn't work for the simple reason that we're too surrounded by too many enemy rifle troops. They kill the mortar before they can finish picking it up to move it. And then we end up losing our team stuck in the alcove as well because the enemy come in here and start shooting at us, and we die a bit faster than we can re-recruit. This brings me back to the start of the mission for another go. This time I had a plan. I just ran wildly into the enemy's defensive choke point because I thought if I get my guys on that anti-air gun before the enemy do, well, that turns the tables, doesn't it? And indeed it does. We also capture one of their heavy machine gun emplacements. With this, we do wipe out the enemy nearby, and getting guys onto the anti-aircraft gun counts as splitting the team, so we can then re-recruit the rest of the team and expand our forces in this fashion. Same thing with these random machine guns that are just sitting around in the area. We can effectively recruit units, but we are under a lot of fire while we do it. Those two towers at the top of the screen both have MG42s firing on us, and they both infinitely spawn rifle troops who run at us as well. So we need to lock this area down and somehow take out those MG42s, but we don't have anything that can do it without walking into their range and getting killed by them. So we begin to encounter a bit of an issue that caused this mission to slow down very heavily, although this time it was much more engaging because I felt like I was being cheeky and exploitative the whole time. We have various things we can try to get through this. As mentioned before, we can blow up parts of the wall. I had thought if I advance on this tower from a different direction, maybe it won't fire at me. But no, the machine gun inside can sort of spawn into the different windows and shoot in any direction really. But you might notice something going on here. We're firing at the tower with our machine gun and they're not firing back. For whatever reason, the machine guns we've captured, despite being the same weapon or the same unit, have slightly, ever so slightly longer range than the garrisoned form of that same weapon. You'd think it would be the other way around because they're a bit higher up. But no, if we can get line of sight on the towers, our stationary machine guns can just about fire at them without taking return fire, and it's fine to sacrifice the airborne to get that line of sight because while they die when they walk around the corner, some more will just handily fall down. And while the mission was implying we need to take out the anti-aircraft guns before we can start re-recruiting our airborne, that doesn't appear to be the case, so this is essentially fine. About 7 minutes later of doing this, we finally take out the first of the two towers. We're a bit closer to taking that sector, which will allow us to get some reinforcements if we can do that. The issue is there's another tower just behind these towers, and that stops me from getting close to them because it also fires at me. So looks like we've got another one to deal with, and this map is effectively covered in these, but this is going to be the hardest point in the mission to get through them. We need to get something that can deal with this more traditionally. For now, let's set up the machine gun to do the exploit again. After a while, we're here. We've taken the towers and we can convert them into these airborne barracks, different to the usual field barracks. In particular, you can't make regular airborne infantry, so we still have no way to make just rifle troops in this mission. We can though make engineers, medics and snipers now, some special units that will help us out immensely going forwards. Once the first batch arrives, another heavy machine gun turns out to be just on the edge of our line of sight and starts firing at us. We need to get out of the way. Sort of the victim of our own exploit here. Now they've got a heavy machine gun just out of range that can fire at us. They're also counter-attacking with vehicles and infantry, but some of our guys in the tower have a rocket launcher, so that deals with the vehicles and the infantry. That's all fine, as usual. Now that we have a sniper, we can clear out the guys in and around the anti-aircraft positions to avoid the risk of running in and taking anti-aircraft fire on our infantry. However, we're still going to have issues with the towers, because while in principle a sniper is a good unit to take out a heavy machine gun in a building, for whatever reason it doesn't really work in practice. Here's an example of it not working for a different reason to what I'm talking about. We just walked around the corner and got shot, but if you have the sniper sit back and fire at a heavy machine gun even if you can't see it, it just misses the whole time. The shots don't even go anywhere near the building. I don't know if that's an intended mechanic, but you can't really shoot in-place weapons out of buildings for some reason with snipers. Maybe the mod has messed it up. I knew what I needed though, that mortar that we saw in the last attempt. So I blew up the wall nearby. The sniper can then gradually kill all of the anti-aircraft gunners here next to the mortar. So I thought, now we're going to go in, grab the thing and blow up the HMG buildings and we'll be fine. The issue is that it's hard for us to get to the mortar. Last time, part of this fence next to it had been knocked over by some stray explosion. This time it's intact. I tried using the half track here to knock the fence down by driving into it. It does work with bigger vehicles, I think. Not this one. We did though reveal this other HMG so our sniper can kill them. You might ask why I don't just blow the fence up with demolition charges like I did to the outer wall. And the answer is I don't really know. The demolition charges can only be targeted onto certain things. So you could use them on the wall and you can't use them on the fence. I don't really know why that is. However, I had something in mind to deal with the fence and here I am pulling it off. We cheekily drive into the compound with the half track to keep these infantry alive. We then take over this building. The reason for that is that when airborne infantry are inside a building, they can throw grenades. Something overwrites their equipment loadout and they don't have demolition charges anymore. They have targetable grenades that we can target onto the fence. There's that flak panzer that was attacking us, ominously driving past. Looks like we're fine. The first time I try to do this, it just doesn't work for some reason. The second time, they do throw a grenade and boom, we take down the fence right next to the mortar. We are in business right here. Now we just have to secure the area and try to get the mortar back into the half track and pull it over to the other side of the map. However, they counterattacked now with a flame half track. This thing is pretty dangerous, especially to the heavy machine gun I've got in that trench at the bottom of the screen. Because the trench counts as a building, when it sets on fire, everything inside just dies instantly, and boom, we lose that heavy machine gun. That's a big deal because when the heavy machine gun dies inside a building, you can't pick the weapon up again like you normally can. It doesn't drop onto the ground, so we can't make another heavy machine gun team. We've lost that one permanently and can't re-recruit them. A shame. But amid all the flames, we do get away with a mortar, and that's what we really needed here. We can bring the mortar over to the right side to blow up some buildings. Just as I did that, the game gave me a Sherman, as if to mock me for bothering trying to get the mortar. Now we have something else that can do the same job effectively. Not very well, admittedly. You can see I'm trying to take down that heavy machine gun with the Sherman. The Sherman's anti-infantry capabilities are pure trash, so even at point-blank range, the machine gun rarely ever hits anything. Sometimes it will kill them. The main gun also sometimes tries to attack and usually misses. We take out that position eventually. I use the mortar team to take down some towers, and now we are in business. We start actually making some progress. The tank does get immobilized by this flame half-track, but you get given a second tank. That's the reward for capturing the main gate. It gives you these tanks and we can use them for various things, including this. What I wanted to do is use our second Sherman to take out this anti-aircraft position. I was worried it might be able to penetrate our armour, since it's supposed to penetrate the armour of planes after all. Well, this tank's a little bit thicker, although it's thicker in a different way as well. It can't work out how to deal with this anti-aircraft position. I'm telling it to attack. First it does this little maneuver to run over the nearby spotlight. I suppose that would actually damage the anti-aircraft gun's ability to fight. Well, then it decides to do this dance where it's just showing the rear armour to the anti-aircraft gun, and we actually do lose health, so we would eventually die if we don't put a stop to this. Eventually I decide to try and attack ground onto the anti-aircraft gun, but the Sherman's main gun is extremely inaccurate, so even at point-blank range it can't hit it. It could be because it's too close. It can't elevate downwards enough to fire at it, although I don't know if that's actually simulated in the game. Well, we actually did it eventually with the machine gun. We moved on to the top right corner. This was a spot where, as mentioned before, enemies will spawn just infinitely off the edge of the map, and this caused an issue because they're kind of in our back lines here. I want to go off to the left, and guys are constantly spawning behind me and running in to interfere with things. They might be able to take out my mortar crew, for example, which we desperately need to keep. I ended up committing one of my heavy machine guns to guard this general area so that as units spawned they would at least come under fire from the heavy machine gun. Most of them were killed as a result. Only a few snuck through to our base further down and got killed by something else. So it was alright in the end. It was another case of elevation on the gun coming into question. We've got the tank on the roof of the enemy base. There's a heavy machine gun crew up here. It can't see me. I can vaguely fire at it. That shot almost hit them, so I thought maybe we can blow this machine gun up. The second shot, way less accurate and goes off somewhere. The idea was there. The tank on the roof plan didn't go very well overall, so we got rid of that. I ended up bringing the mortar over instead. You had to blow up this one particular building on the roof where the enemy were commanding their operations from. And then we have a secondary objective to kill the base commandant, who is going to try and escape right now. He tries to escape by running right through our troops. Dangerous, but it goes okay for him. He's making a decent run for it. He's got some health, essentially, so we have to shoot him a number of times to kill him. And down he goes. So that's the secondary objective and a medal, I think, acquired. Not that it really matters, but being on the roof with a mortar team proved useful to just fire at things nearby inside the base. And at the same time we had this little conundrum where an enemy flak panzer was coming towards our main base and blowing everything up. Fortunately, we managed to somewhat kill it by dancing around, constantly re-recruiting guys as it flaks us to death. Fortunately, while a flak panzer, I guess, is designed to fire at aerial units, they don't fire at our guys coming down on parachute. We eventually convince our guy with the recoilless rifle to bother firing at the flak panzer at point blank range as well. Doesn't quite kill it, but we're getting there. And more trouble back up the top of the map with infinitely respawning enemy units that are recapturing positions I thought I had. I was setting up here to make a main run towards the enemy's final position with my tanks. This ended up being scuppered by this armoured car of mine. I had targeted them onto some of those spawning infantry, but the infantry somehow survived and ran all the way across the map under fire into the enemy base. My armoured car followed them, and putting a unit in the middle of their base spawned a load of things. That must have been a trigger. And a ton of anti-vehicle infantry spawned next to where I'd happened to park my heavy vehicles. So they're in trouble now, and we're not going to be recovering from the damage done there. Inconvenient, but at least we are still up on the roof and can gradually kill them with our mortar team. Although you can see I tried this avant-garde strategy of reversing into the anti-tank guys to try and run them over. Something tells me that was a bad idea. Looks like we've even almost killed that flak panzer. No idea why they're so powerful, but this rocket launcher of ours seems to be very ineffective against it. Eventually, another point-blank range, extremely dangerous shot does the job. To finish off is a shot of me using that roof advantage with our mortars. I think I brought a sniper up here as well to kill stuff that's down there and the odd thing that came up to challenge us. We can't complete the mission though. We're trying to blow up that rocket launch site down there, but you have to do it with demolition charges at point-blank range. On the way there were 2 tanks guarding this area, but for whatever reason they didn't aggro. They occasionally drove about, and one of them drove down to be right next to the rocket, but they never tried to attack me. I almost killed them with the mortars, but it was taking so long that I moved in infantry, who just did fine because the tanks weren't paying attention. We then blow up this rocket launch site, and the good news is that this base is completely wired to blow for some reason, so as the rocket goes off, a chain reaction goes through the concrete buildings. Maybe that's a bit plausible, but then even the rails outside the building just start blowing up as well. Everything blows up. It's a wonder we didn't blow the place up already with our shenanigans. Well, that's the enemy's rocket launch potential hampered. I thought that was an interesting mission, having to work with limited resources and make your own strategy. And then I thought this next mission was better for a different reason. We start this one off seeing the younger brother of Captain Nobody, Private Nobody, has an encounter with a remote-controlled tank on a bridge. This seems like a pretty nifty weapon. It blows up, kills a bunch of people, looks like Nobody got his body back at the last second there, and down goes the bridge. And we actually have to repair this bridge as the first stage of the mission to enter the rest of the map. We need to bring engineers up to it to do that. However, there's a machine gun and an anti-aircraft gun sitting there. Normally that's probably easy to deal with, but we can't go anywhere near them. However, the mission does give you the Sherman Calliope for free, which is a multiple rocket launcher vehicle that is a little bit inaccurate, shall we say. I tried to fire at the machine gun. Most of the shots hit just about everything else on the screen. We were lucky enough though that one of them hits the roof of the building and collapses it, taking out the machine gun. I then used a mortar crew to defeat the anti-aircraft gun, and with that we capture this area and can repair the bridge. Even before we're done, I landed an airborne observer on the other side, a tiny team that can call down other units, but for now I'm just using it as a spotter to see the enemy units in the next area we need to attack and also bombard them. So we got some good use out of this rocket launcher vehicle. Our goal is to capture this town square. Fortunately, there are no anti-tank defenses here, so just having a tank park nearby and gradually shoot everything is good enough. Although that flamethrower crew does take out this Sherman's engine, so now it's stuck there for now. Well, just getting line of sight is enough because we have snipers, mortars, and a howitzer that I brought up as well to help out. The howitzer is an underrated unit by me. I should have been using it the whole time instead of mortar crews, really. It's like a really good mortar crew that breaks a lot of the stalemate of not really being able to advance very easily in this mod. Now I made a massive mistake. I did the objective. I think by not capturing this town centre, we would have not triggered the next part of the mission, which is defend the town centre for 30 minutes. So now it's saying set up defences and capture the nearby areas to get resources. Well, we probably could have done that without capturing the town, so that when the countdown started, the entire place was already surrounded by a minefield and tank traps and things. Instead, I tried to quickly push out of the town to grab some of the resource points. Unfortunately, there's a half-track which can just kill infantry with its machine gun, and one of their tanks which can kill one of my tanks easily. So we end up in trouble quite rapidly because at the same time the town square is under attack from the back, no less, incoming tanks and half-tracks and random trucks as well. The trucks are carrying those Goliath remote control explosive things. By taking out the trucks, you can actually use them yourself, although I didn't come up with anything creative to do with them, because I was so frantically microing everything else, essentially. The good news is that the enemy appears to be scripted to drive through the town, not necessarily to park in the town and try to take it. So these big tanks just sort of drive off for now and we retain control of the area. Another complication is that they have their own multiple rocket launchers that are firing on the town. The first bombardment kind of hit the edge and took out one of their own infantry assaults, so that was nice. But it would also be good to try and take those guys down. I had this grand plan of landing airborne troops outside the town to hunt down the rocket launch positions and destroy them. This didn't work particularly well just because the enemy's infantry are hanging around out there as well, and they have some static units defending their rocket launch positions anyway. For the first one, I took my howitzer, got it outside of the town to be vaguely in range of where the rockets were coming from, and fired roughly at where the map objective was, hoping I would somehow hit them. And it looks like I did, because later it says I've neutralized the rocket battery. Well, that worked out. I was still trying to push around the town a little bit, but this was about the time when I gave up on that and thought, well, we barely have enough units to defend the town. Let's just sit here and try to get away with this. You can see the AI has set up a pretty decent forward base. There's a barracks right outside the square, surrounded by units. If those units pushed in, they probably could take the square. It's really just defended by those engineers in a trench, who are doing an amazing job actually, because the half-track with a machine gun can't really kill them while they're garrisoned in there, so it's delaying things greatly. And speaking of delay, my reinforcements aren't showing up because the bridge got destroyed by something, maybe one of those rockets that was falling down. So now we have to repair it again. That takes several minutes and we don't even have the engineers to do it right now. So we need to hold on with these half-dead things in the town square. We can supplement them by turning some of the buildings into field barracks. Ideally, we would have done that to every building before capturing the town, so we just had stuff everywhere. But no, we for now are going to have just a couple, but that's a little bit better than absolutely nothing. We can constantly re-recruit and try to just hang on somehow. These rockets coming down aren't doing us any favours, but we're just surviving because they happen to miss most of the time. These tanks roll into town and that's going to make things more difficult for us. We do lack anti-tank weaponry. We've got our flamethrower engineers in a trench gradually killing one of the tanks, which is very much on fire but is still shooting its machine gun back at us. I'm trying to get a rocket launcher onto these airborne troops I've dropped in. We don't really have the time to do it, but we can throw the anti-vehicle sticky bombs. This tank comes in and parks on top of my mortar crew without really killing it. They just stop and then don't shoot at it, so that's absolutely great. Then I came up with this idea to take out the Nebelwerfers. We can use a scout plane and an attack plane ability at the same time to find out where they are and then shoot the ground. That actually was much more effective than I expected. It totally wipes out one of the crews there. So that takes the pressure off. Now only 1/3 of the amount of rockets that would be coming down is. There are multiple enemy tanks parked in the town square that just aren't shooting us very much, which is nice. Then our reinforcements arrive after the bridge is repaired, along with a heavy anti-tank gun that clears out the enemy vehicles. The enemy are now attacking with a decent amount of infantry, but we're starting to get this place locked down with several garrisoned buildings and trenches everywhere. It's hard for them to walk to the middle and decap the point, so we're kind of okay now. Another aerial attack brings down the final Nebelwerfer battery, so that's a secondary objective done, and we're going to be less dead, albeit right at the end of the time period we have to defend for. The town is in a bit of a poor state, as you can see, but it's also not really under attack anymore. We've got anti-infantry defences facing all directions all over the place, so while tanks can get in and be annoying, I have to chase them around with the anti-tank gun to kill them. They can't decap the point, and that's all that matters right now. We've even brought up the Sherman crocodile, the anti-infantry tank, to just set everything on fire as they try to get into the town. Combined with heavy machine guns, snipers, and garrisoned infantry, it all ends up going fine in the end. I thought that was a very good mission, another one, because defending really suits this game, and in particular this mod, because it's very action-packed but doesn't require that much micro, and it's much less annoying than trying to advance and take buildings by slowly getting rid of the threats inside, since you just die if you advanced. Way better than earlier stuff. I think defending is this game's forte, and there are some later missions that have the same advantage, but for now we are moving back onto the annoying offensive. Now we're out in the countryside and we need to capture a certain hill, so let's get to work on that. It starts though with this interesting cutscene where Private Nobody is back, and he is stunned to discover, hidden in the hedgerows, an error message appears to have defeated a large number of the previous team that tried to take this hill. This is one of the other companies in our regiment, I think. Well, those error messages are something to be reckoned with for sure, and off it goes, back into the bushes, not even going to consume its prey. It hunts for sport, by the looks of things, dangerous stuff. We now conduct a classic too scared to advance, where we locate enemy snipers, machine guns, mortars and anti-tank crews, and gradually kill them, always too scared to get close because there's almost certainly another one just behind them out of the line of sight, so you never know what can go forward without dying. I think the more efficient way to do this would be to just plow forwards with cheap things like jeeps and scout cars, and just find out where everything is and then know whether it's safe to send a tank into a certain field or something like that. So we're doing things the safe way. It's very cost effective, but it's wasting real world time. And in a strategy sense, it's a bad idea because most of our troops are doing nothing most of the time, and if the AI was really playing against us, they would have ample time to re-recruit everything we're slowly destroying in this fashion. Luckily, it's another mission where they don't really play against you, they just have infinitely respawning things appearing now and again, mostly regular rifle infantry. I was tricked to some extent by this bunker in a field right next to our base. I daren't go near it until I discovered it's actually empty. Unlike regular buildings, it has a red health bar even if there's nobody in the bunker, so we end up using the dozer to take down the hedge next to it and then cheekily set it on fire. This does nothing and also reveals there was nobody alive inside anyway. We can get some engineers to take it out. You can see vaguely what I've been doing. I've been setting up forward bases every 5 meters effectively, putting down sandbags and triage centers and using a half track to re-recruit things to very slowly crawl our way forward. We can take advantage of the simplistic line of sight to look through the hedges. Once you're close to the edge of a field, you can see what's in it without having anyone who can actually see into the field, literally speaking. So you can use that to shoot over the hedges and blow stuff up without them ever aggroing onto you. Meaning we can do the exploit advance pretty easily as long as they don't notice us. But they're doing something similar back to us now. They have rocket launchers somewhere that are bombarding us. Here looks like I decided to spare this scout car by not making it fight the anti-tank crew. We don't get very far here because we are counter-attacked by a bunch of panzers. And I think we've triggered something now, because from this point on in the mission, the AI kept either building or spawning panzers somewhere and sending them at us now and again. 3 panzers is enough to take out pretty much our entire attack group, and we have to get out of there. Just 1 panzer would be an issue because it can take out a tank, and we only have enough pop space to realistically bring 1 or 2 tanks up to the front line. I decided to use my next tank, like I was going to use my scout car, to drive forwards, identify the enemy's positions and call in artillery. We're going to blow up those two panzers sitting on top of each other. Our Sherman lasts just long enough to give us the line of sight to do that, also being rocket bombarded. And then the artillery comes in. I had hoped to blow up both of these tanks since they're weirdly sitting on top of each other. We do get a few direct hits, but it's not quite enough to take them out. A third tank drives into the fray though and takes a load of damage as well, so a bit of extra value. We traded one Sherman health bar for more than one Panzer health bar, that's something at least. So I'm continuing to try and build my way forward, but the rocket bombardments make that pretty difficult. We have to take out a building apparently nearby to stop them, although we'll see that's somewhat of a lie. And the presence of more enemy panzers is making going anywhere hard. I finally brought up an anti-tank gun. If it can survive the rocket bombardments long enough, it will gradually work through the panzers, who don't have the best anti-infantry capability most of the time, or at least we can sacrifice something else to keep the anti-tank gun alive. Once we're past this group, I advance as quickly as I can, just blindly driving forwards now with no prior checking, and lucky enough the next field doesn't have anything anti-tank-ish in it, so I can get to the artillery tower. Once we can see it properly, we can have the howitzers fire at it, the off-map howitzers that is. They're still firing at me and we're in big trouble, but as long as they're not killing that half-track on the left, I can constantly re-recruit the infantry and have the engineers repair the tanks. This takes longer than it takes for them to fire the rockets again, but they don't always fire them in the same place. That's essentially all we're relying on at this stage. Still, more panzers are coming down. This is about 5 minutes after the last shot. We've barely advanced at all because of the combined time cost of re-recruiting, repairing, and having to fight panzers. The artillery tower is down though, so theoretically they can't fire those rockets at us anymore. We'll see though that there's some other rule that decides that they can in a second. It seems that we've stopped the first level of rocket attack, so they can't attack us now, but once we trigger the second level, they'll start doing it again. Cut to here we are in the field next to the enemy's base. We're almost there, and now the rockets come back. I think being close to the capture point brings back this mechanic in some way, so now we're being bombarded again pretty heavily. There's another fake bunker here that our engineers are trying to take out. I feel like in the vanilla game the bunkers had something in them, maybe in this mod they just don't for some reason. I timed it, the rockets come down every 40 seconds here, so they've increased their rate of fire. That's going to be an issue for us. They also take out our half-track, so my creeping advance is now over. I pop back to base and start trying to find where I even got that half-track from. This is something like I mentioned earlier where you have to change menus on certain buildings to see the other things that they can build. While I was doing that, an enemy half-track with flamethrowers has come down and taken everything out, so our advance has been completely obliterated at the last second. It'll take a few minutes to get some stuff back up here, a few minutes in which more rockets can be fired at us of course. Luckily we do finish off that half-track for now, so we've got a few guys left alive in this field. I think I have a field medic here as well who can heal some of the wounded soldiers. That's a little bit better than nothing. However, they're still spamming stuff at us, so we can't last for long. I brought up the Calliope to act as our anti-tank unit, but once a tank showed up, I thought, nope, I'm not risking it, and got out of there. So we are actually being straight up pushed back by the AI, the first time that my exploity advance has finally failed. We're going the wrong direction, and it turns out those rockets can now hit the entire map. That's the second level of upgrade I guess I was getting at. Our guys right at the back are being hit by the rockets as well. Inconvenient. The good news is that after falling back, the enemy didn't press the attack there. They just sat in that field we were in, so I can start building up again in the next field over. I'm going to set up a howitzer and our Calliope here, who will both be in range of the enemy's base, and our off-map artillery deals with that nearby tank. I just needed some line of sight to know what I was working with, so I drove in, tried to very quickly fire the off-map howitzers at the enemy's positions. But the area of effect has to be fully in your line of sight, so things on the edge of your line of sight can't be targeted, and the Sherman I was scouting with dies instantly. But I knew vaguely what I was working with, and you can fire the Calliope's rockets out of your line of sight, so we just start generally bombarding that area. And it's the same deal with this, the howitzer, once again the star unit that I just don't use for a while and then remember that I have. It's actually quite hard to find in the menus, I think I mentioned that earlier, the howitzer, but once you eventually work out how to build it, you can just fire into the fog of war, and it actually acts as scouting itself because anytime you damage a unit it shows up through the fog of war. So we know there we've taken out some of the enemy's anti-tank capability. 3 more panzers appeared actually behind us this time, so they're spawning somewhere to the right hand side of the map where I haven't gone yet. At this stage I just thought, let's do it. I just sprinted into the enemy base. Most of the infantry's dead, there's still a panzer guarding the area, but I thought we should be able to capture the flag, and that's all the objective is in this mission. We don't have to do anything substantial up here. Those back attack panzers are going to wipe out our Calliope and most of the stuff back there. We're unable to take out the panzer attacking us here because, again, I'm unable to bring in a howitzer shot. I think in retrospect, you're just not allowed to fire off-map artillery into command sectors, so like special areas of the map. I've noticed it in various other places, I'm not quite sure because it didn't actually say at any point. Well, we're getting wrecked. 3 panzers are coming in from the back, they've killed half our stuff. The other panzers gradually killing the infantry at the top of the hill. But our flag is there, so technically we win. The most edgy and technical mission completion I think we've seen so far. We did it, whatever that was. Looks like we didn't do it fast enough to get a medal though. Sadly, it's another city offensive mission next. This is the first mission, by the way, where I didn't remember it from having played this many years ago, so this must be roughly as far as I got when I was a youth playing this game. We start off in range of an enemy rocket battery that has guided missiles by the looks of things. I think the mod might be making them more powerful than they're supposed to be because they completely obliterate us even when they miss somehow. Well, we eventually move up with mortars and snipers to deal with that. And then it's just another case of moving around the map, very slowly clearing out stuff in buildings, anti-tank positions, all the bad stuff. There were several things though that made this easier than normal. First was me just being more brazen. I decided to just sort of charge around in the tanks. Normally, when you turn a random corner, you won't instantly die to anti-tank fire, simply because the map is so built up, there's stuff everywhere, that you're in cover like all the time when you drive around. Plus, as mentioned before, anti-tank guns don't turn to face you if you're near them. So you can just drive up to them, like right here, as long as you're slightly out of their arc of fire, they won't shoot you. And we can also use the off-map artillery to clear things out. The other development of this mission was me realizing that these ranger infantry are somewhat useful. In particular, they're sort of an anti-tank unit in that the upgrade to give them a bazooka is really powerful. It's like the enemy's anti-tank units. Before, I hadn't really invested in anti-tank infantry, just because the normal rifle troops can't be anti-tank and the airborne anti-tank infantry weren't that good. But these ranger anti-tank squads are actually good enough to take out enemy panzers, sometimes in one hit, as we saw just earlier. So that's a very nice thing to know about. I think you actually can't recruit them in this mission. I was just keeping the same 2 units I got given at the start alive using a half-track and some medics the whole time. Here's an example of me just absolutely demolishing an enemy defensive position. It was swarming with anti-tank guns, machine guns, all the stuff that normally would just kill us instantly if we advanced. But by just scouting it out a bit with some sacrificial riflemen and then bombarding it from afar, it's a bit faster than grinding them down by running at them as the game I think intends you to do. You're supposed to be able to survive running at machine guns and the like. My momentum is destroyed when a panzer shows up and blows up both of my tanks. It took a full 6 minutes to get those tanks back. It's so long, the time to replenish dead units. That's a really annoying thing that I don't like. We were lucky so far in this mission to have not taken many losses. Well, once we're back and ready to re-attack this part of the map, we have some good luck, I suppose. The enemy's 2 panzers defending this area both decide to face the wrong direction. And this time I'm here with the anti-tank Sherman. Unfortunately, it misses its first shot against the back of that panzer, and the turret is ominously turning round. I thought we were in big trouble. Luckily, another shot comes in and finishes the deal. The other panzer hasn't noticed what's going on, so we can finish that guy off as well. So that was handy. I could then charge in with the Sherman crocodile and clear out the machine guns that were covering this square. Take it and move on. We end up here in the top of the map, and this was the point that was about halfway through my playthrough of this mission. We're quite close to the end, but there was another half an hour of this mission to go, mainly because of some mistakes and some AI sneakiness, which we'll get to. First we had a setback due to losses. We turned a corner and encountered a panzer and some garrisoned anti-tank infantry, so I had to fall back from that area. All I need to do is capture that area, by the way, to finish the mission. But as I'll explain, I didn't think that was the case, and that's going to vastly extend this mission for me. We're also being back attacked by this half-track, which takes out a whole bunch of our stuff. We can take it down, but we're now very damaged, so we need to spend time re-recruiting and getting tanks back. And the other thing I wanted to do was try to attack the enemy's nearby base. But while setting up to do that with a howitzer, another enemy half-track appears behind us and takes out our howitzer crew. That's pretty inconvenient. The logic here was I thought where this mission was going was we had to capture the edges of the map for the objectives, and then the enemy in the center would try to break out and you'd have to hold them in like a siege and be attacked at all your various points. That's not where this is going. But I delayed for a long time setting up defenses around the map and using my howitzers to slowly bombard the enemy's base to take out units that were stationed inside, hoping to make the final part of the mission easier. So while I thought I was being pretty cheeky here and getting one up on the game, this is going to have no effect whatsoever. If you just don't attack the enemy base, it doesn't matter. They don't produce units from it, and the units that are sitting in there don't do anything. Therefore, good stuff. We wasted another 20 minutes doing that, and we were still getting attacked by the enemy's half-tracks from behind the whole time. We developed, though, this little setup where I had the enemy's main route of advance into the square blocked off with mines and tank traps. It turned out, though, that from their spawn point they could take another route down the edge of the map and appear even more behind me than before. We lose our half-track, so that's our ability to re-recruit here damaged. They then started firing at the howitzer. I thought it would die, but I managed to turn it to face them, and I think this keeps it alive. I believe what's going on here is the howitzer has the same properties as an anti-tank gun defensively, where it acts as if there's a bulletproof screen in front of it. So while we saw a minute ago, it dies pretty much straight away if it gets attacked by the half-track's machine gun from behind. From the front, this half-track can barely do anything, and we do get back in time to kill it and avoid major damage or losses, but a bit of damage. Actually have to repair our tank after this. What we're going to do is now cover that back road in mines, so the next time this happens we've got better defenses. So here we are a couple of minutes later with a newly set up defensive position here, also setting up a barracks in the nearby house so we can be here permanently. Here comes the next half-track. Boom, there it goes. They also started spawning panzers back there as well. There's one immobilized sitting near where the original set of mines were. But that doesn't matter, as mentioned. Essentially, it got to the point when I thought, well, I'm bored of firing at the enemy base. Let's just capture the point and see what happens. What happens is, it's the next mission. Here we go. So I thought that mission kind of sucked. This mission, I was excited to play when it started because it looked like it was going to be a bit different, but spoilers, the second half at least isn't really. The promising aspect was that we're in this more open area, and the mission is just to take out a bunch of enemy tanks that are hidden around the industrial zone we're in. I'm using the recon troop for the first time. This is a guy that extends your line of sight. Very useful because most units can shoot beyond their usual line of sight if something else can see things further down range. We can use that here to get a tank destroyer to start attacking this enemy panzer. The problem is an enemy panther appears right next to us. The mission is to kill 7 panthers, the heavier version of the panzer. The good news though is that this panther gets stuck in a hole in the ground and then turns its rear armor to us, and our tank destroyer takes it out. The tank destroyer effectively being a mobile anti-tank gun that costs a lot more pop cap to have, so we can't use very many of them unfortunately. But that was pretty good. So what I thought this mission was going to be was something a bit more fast-paced, where it's about setting traps for the panthers, luring them forwards, and then appearing, like I'm doing here, from around a corner with a tank destroyer, using the shermans as sacrifices who might survive 1 or 2 of the enemy's attacks, and then we pop out for this point-blank range tank destroyer hit. That does tons of damage even to these very heavy tanks. We do live this dream for perhaps that first one, and definitely this second one. That felt like a somewhat deliberate tactic I did there to achieve something. It was kind of good, almost. The next one, though, was a bit more janky because we ended up sitting near a panther. I can't advance because there's an anti-tank gun just around the corner. But what I could do is use our binoculars guy to look at the panther and allow our anti-tank gun to fire at it from outside of the panther's return fire range, and indeed outside of its aggro range. The downside to doing this is that even our big anti-tank gun can't penetrate the front armor of a Panther, so you can fire at it and it just bounces off. Even after spending the munitions to give them the special armor-piercing ammunition, they just ping off the front armor, surely making a noise that might wake up the guys inside, but perhaps not. Well, this situation ends up improving without me doing anything, which is quite nice. I just kept firing, thinking maybe there's some RNG, I'll get a crit hit or something and it will penetrate. Eventually, they decided to just turn around. Well, that was generous of them. We sort of aggroed them in some way, I guess. They woke up, but all they did is face the other direction, something we saw in the last mission as well. Maybe there's something wrong with the AI and it thinks its back is the front, so when it's in combat it turns the back sometimes. There's that anti-tank gun that I'm too scared to advance towards. Well, we take out that Panther, just sort of somehow. That one felt a bit cheaper, unfortunately. But the idea was there. This was the point when the mission started to break down for me. For a strange reason as well. Essentially, the AI started suddenly playing the game. And while I actually wanted them to do this in many missions, once they are doing it, I realized this is kind of annoying. From this point on, the AI's base, which is at the top of the map, started pumping out units, and they're actively attacking my base. The issue is, the AI's pop cap is way higher than yours. You absolutely cannot afford to defend your base with units because you need all of your units at the front, especially in cases like in this mission where the enemy can come at you from multiple directions. I think I had one tank destroyer somewhere just facing a road that had half tracks coming down it sometimes, so that sort of allowed me to not think about that, but that was 12 pop cap points out of the window that I can't use. We get back to our base here and take out this enemy assault. There's a tank stuck somewhere in one of our buildings we need to kill that you can barely see because of the camera work. But the issue is, having to drive back here is really annoying. You might notice a theme in my commentary of this game. I get annoyed whenever I have to do something. What I kind of liked was the action-packed defense where you're doing a moderate amount, but a lot is happening in response. With these offensive missions, you have to do a lot to achieve even a tiny amount of stuff. And the second there's some sort of pace breaker, like a distraction where you have to wait 5 minutes to rebuild your units, or wait 10 minutes because you have to go back to the start of the level with your slow-moving tanks and fight some random enemy infantry that they've got way above their pop cap because they're the AI, it's just a bit annoying. It doesn't feel particularly fun to me to do this, even though I also complain about this not happening because it feels like the AI isn't playing if they're not actively attacking you and just waiting for you to very boringly eventually kill them by exploiting the edge of your line of sight. I literally cannot be satisfied. I think something big needs to change for me to really like this game. Funnily enough, we're going to see the kinds of changes I might like to see actually in the game later on. There is some variety later that makes the end half of the game much better than the first half, in my opinion. But for now, I thought I might as well try to take down their base. That would make my life easier. Again, like in the last mission, we don't need to, we just have to defeat the tanks, and they're not here. They're in the parts of the map I haven't been to, effectively. But I thought I'll fight here for a bit and try to take out their buildings to reduce their production. They're just spitting out stuff over here. The issue is that the base is a bit well defended, and once it's a bit defended, it's really hard to get in. They've got mortars, tanks, and anti-tank infantry in that big building. While trying to work out what to do about this, I made another sort of mistake. I found this heavy machine gun team in a bush with a jeep, and attacking them triggered some sort of scripted event where one of the Panthers appears from the bushes and comes to attack our base. The good news is it just face planted into our HQ and did nothing, similar to the earlier tank attack. I think the AI doesn't know what to do once it actually gets here if we don't have units here to fight. I sent all of my tanks back to the base to take out the Panther and the supporting infantry. But while I was doing that, the stuff I left camping outside the enemy base is attacked from both sides by Panzers and a Panther. So, good move from the AI, they got me here. We lose our anti-tank stuff and everything else is routed away. Meanwhile, my tanks, which were driving back to the front, get annihilated by some other stuff. There were other Panzers who've been moving around the map and hiding in places I had previously cleared out. Dangerous. And these enemy Panzers are pretty good. A tank destroyer can't take them one-on-one, even here 2-on-1 with the anti-tank Sherman as well helping. We couldn't bring down that enemy Panzer. The Panzer IV, I think it is a pretty decent unit, it turns out. Better than most stuff that we have. We can, though, upgrade our tank destroyers and get slightly better versions of them using our command points, so I'm going to try that. I then thought I'm just going to advance into the part of the map we haven't seen and forget about the enemy base for now. While doing that, we encounter the AI using some cheeky exploits with this anti-tank gun. This tank is theoretically hidden from that anti-tank gun, but it can shoot through declines. I saw before playing Dawn of War that stairs and ramps have weird line of sight calculations, and you can often shoot through things when the elevation changes in an area. The enemy also sent like 6 half-tracks to attack my base at this stage. Luckily, with my recent losses, I had popcap space to build a tank in my base, and because all of these half-tracks are only anti-infantry units, our tank destroyers can gradually take them all out. After that, we go back to basics. I pull out this mortar truck, just a faster version of a mortar effectively, and start sitting around gradually firing outside of my line of sight. We are back to here, back to the nightmare, because there's a machine gun and an anti-tank gun next to each other. They complement each other in that they counter each other's counters, so we have to kill one of them before we can advance, and we do that by shooting into the fog of war, looking for the experience pop-ups that tell you you've killed something. 10 minutes later, we're here, outside the enemy base on the other side. There's a panther right there. I was trying to set up some mines to draw the panther into a trap. That didn't work, and while it was happening, those panzers that were sitting in the middle of the map are still there. I was trying to drive past to get my tanks up to the position where the mines are. I had been using the tanks to scout the rest of the map looking for panthers. However, we just get absolutely annihilated here, broadly speaking. It's really hard to take down a Panzer IV with a tank destroyer. I think what I'd like to see is, if they can kill us in one shot, maybe we could kill them in one shot in exchange or something like that. There's an RNG element to it as well, but as you can see, we get annihilated, partially also because they had infantry behind us shooting anti-tank weapons from the back. Very cheeky. There's then another 10-minute period where I gradually advance up on this enemy base. The Panther we did see here before isn't here anymore. All I need to do now is find it and kill it to win. But it wasn't coming towards us, so I'm sort of pushing into the enemy's really tightly clustered defenses. They've got mortars, anti-tank stuff, flamethrowers, they're building tanks and half-tracks. And it was very difficult to get anywhere close to that big building without immediately losing our tanks. I also tried building this Sherman howitzer, a special unit that has different attack patterns to regular Shermans. It doesn't fire normally, and you can manually target it to make really big high explosive attacks against buildings, but they're extremely inaccurate and it didn't really respond very well to orders, so not much came of that. Finally, once we're in the middle of the enemy base, we find the Panther. It was on the other side where I was attacking from before. Now all we need to do is take it down. We're going to ignore the fact that enemy flamethrowers are gradually setting all of my stuff on fire. Because we do get this opportunity, the Panther decides to turn its rear towards us once again. It kills my tank destroyer, but we've almost killed the Panther, and the anti-tank Sherman comes around the corner to finish the job, still getting that rear armor hit. And that, at last, is that. It took about an hour and a half to do that mission, and I was very stressed out by how annoying it was, basically. And it's actually not quite over in the cutscene anyway. There was another tank, and we get this incredibly dramatic scene where this guy, who I believe is the commander of our company, gets blown to smithereens, or just one smithereen, because the game isn't that gory, I suppose. In Company of Heroes 2, they did something a little bit like this, but in that game, one of the characters in the cutscenes was like you, and there was more of a plot. Here, these characters, I think they get names now and again, and the names change because there aren't many voice actors and many face portraits. I don't know. There's a plot to this game, and one of the characters died. The guy standing next to him, curiously enough, is fine. Is this a plot hole in Company of Heroes? Who would have believed it? Well, now there's a new guy theoretically in charge of our forces, but actually it's still me. And the good news is that we're now going into the good bit of the game, really. Here, we have 2 back-to-back defensive missions to do. We've also teamed up with the error message once again. We just have to defend this hill for half an hour. That's a really good mission setup because it's not too long, and there's going to be stuff happening the entire time. Even when the enemy aren't attacking you, you can productively be making defenses and feel like you're doing something. So I've surrounded our hill with heavy machine guns. That's enough to deal with any infantry attacks. We also have to defend a base that's off the hill down to the left. To deal with this, I essentially started putting mines everywhere, just mining all of the roads around the town. And that's going to be sufficient to do the secondary objective, which is to not lose the town. You don't have to hold it, but with mines everywhere, that sort of does it while I wasn't looking at things. I don't have any footage of the mines actually stopping the enemy's attacks because I wasn't looking for the most part when they happened. But we saw a couple of explosions at the corner of the screen there, maybe that was the best shot I could find. On the minimap you can see that something is stuck in one of our minefields near the place we're supposed to be defending, so we've immobilized some vehicle, I guess, down there. I'm busy microing everything else because enemy infantry squads and tanks are still making their way up the hill. The tanks are something of an issue because we do lack anti-tank capabilities. I have a couple of anti-tank guns that keep getting their crews killed, so I'm constantly rebuilding and recrewing them to fight the enemy off here. At least the infantry aren't much problem, because I have a slit trench here that I can just garrison in if they do get to the very top and immediately shoot back with minimal risk of casualties. Then we pop back out, get some upgrades, get the anti-tank guns, and we're back in position. I also set up a minefield in this gap between the hedgerows, thinking something might come through it, and this paid off because they did actually start sending loads of vehicles through that particular gap. We immobilized one of their tanks, which is perfect. I then ordered the howitzer to fire at it while it was immobilized. Another half-track comes in as well and gets hit by either the mines or the howitzer fire. This guy's coming in from a different direction, but our regular infantry are really close because they're in this trench network. Once the tanks get into line of sight of us, we're close enough to use the anti-tank grenades to start doing damage, and that does the business. Overall, a great time was had. A short and frantic mission similar to the one with the bridge repairs earlier, just defending an area for a not particularly long amount of time against tons of enemies. That's pretty good. I think that's a better gauntlet design than advancing through a bunch of static enemies across a big map. And the next mission, well, it's just that mission again, which was quite generous of them because I enjoyed it so much the first time, I was perfectly happy to just do it again. It's now the next day or something. The enemy is still attacking this hill, and we can defend it against some other things instead. And like we saw earlier in the game, all of the defensive emplacements you built in the previous mission are still here. That means the minefields that weren't blown up in the last mission are still on the roads, and that's handy for us. There's something new going on here as well, as you might have noticed. We've got victory points. It's a classic RTS system where we have control points across the map, and if you control more than the enemy at a given time, you start ticking down your timer, or ticking down the enemy's timer actually, and if you get enough number or the enemy loses enough number, then you win. It's pretty simple, but it means there's a lot more purpose to defending specific areas. And it means the AI has something to do. It means it can switch targets and attack different places productively, and you have to be a bit more on your toes defensively. I quite liked this, and I thought this would be better for a lot of missions that were about capturing territory. I would rather be able to capture and hold half of the map and win that way than have to capture the whole map. Again, complaining about having to play the game. I want some of the gameplay to come to me. I'm old and stressed. Although this is partially just because of the effects of the Blitzkrieg mod, of course, that makes advancing particularly hard and defending particularly satisfying. Early on, we claim the 3 points we need to always have the advantage, so now the enemy's timer will always be going down. If the enemy decaps one of our places, that's okay, but if they were to capture it, then neither side would be losing points. So we have to try and at least vaguely hold 3 different positions. This does stretch us thinner than in the previous mission, and the enemy are successfully attacking our base. They could take out our production buildings, which would be relatively inconvenient, but because we have the second base off the hill, I can re-recruit engineer units and come back up here to either repair or remake buildings. I think I did actually lose a couple of the buildings at some point. So it's not that bad, and our other base is still surrounded by minefields, so they're fine down there. And a special shout out to the Sherman driving across the top of our hill that catches some air off that trench. Not too bad, and I wonder if somewhere we could use that to get the Sherman to jump over a wall that's supposed to be indestructible or something. I'm sensing a possible exploit use of this glitch. Well, we're not going to explore that for now. Soon we have victory comfortably in our hands. We completely annihilated them. Here again, exploiting line of sight. The enemy on the hillside there are getting pinned and killed by a machine gun that's well out of their line of sight due to the slope of the hill, but the game doesn't take that into consideration. So somehow we were stopping the enemy getting to the top of the hill. A hidden tank destroyer stops that half-track from going after the other point, and broadly speaking, we obliterated that mission. We now go into another interesting mission, another special one too. the only goal is to defeat one enemy tank. There's a tiger somewhere on this map, and we need to kill it. I thought in practice this would mean going across the entire map like a normal stage, but I was pleasantly surprised to find that the enemy tiger leads sorties against you. It comes at you with groups of other vehicles, fights you for a bit, and then goes back to hide somewhere. So you have the opportunity to attack it while it's near you, and if you can't do that, you could go across the map and look for it, but you'll see we're not going to be doing that. The issue, of course, will be that while our tanks suffer against Panzer IVs, they suffer quite a lot against Panthers, well, they're all but useless against the Tiger, which is immune to damage from most things. However, we are given the Pershing, which is the allied equivalent thing to the Tiger, a gigantic, oversized tank. And we strike a hit early on that takes off a bunch of health, it then pops smoke and runs away. My Pershing almost died in the engagement, and it's really hard to remake a Pershing. You can build them, but it's at the end of the command tree, so we'd have to sit here grinding kills to get experience, and could eventually get another Pershing. Instead, I sat here for ages trying to repair it, and when I realised, well, if the tank's going to attack us, we don't necessarily have to leave our base, I thought, why don't we just hunker down here and try to make the most anti-tank base possible? The problem is, if you look in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, you might note something. Our resources are glitched. I wasn't able to get any more resources after the start of the stage. Now what we could do is try restarting the stage to see if the resources would work like normal, and then I could do my plan. But because I'm cheeky, I wanted to see if we could somehow do it anyway without having regenerating resources as an extra challenge. All that meant that by the time the Tiger was here again, we weren't really much stronger than the first time, we didn't do any damage to it, and it just came in and blew up our Pershing, so that's the end of that. However, now we are generating resources. It seemed that having the Pershing on the field was possibly intentionally stopping us from gaining resources. Well, now it's dead, that's better, because we can just make engineers and put down mines and stuff instead, which is less vulnerable to being immediately destroyed than really expensive units like the Pershing that we can't re-recruit anyway. When the Tiger next returns, we're not quite ready. I was in the middle of building an anti-tank gun, and I've got my one anti-tank Sherman hiding in the corner, trying to avoid being noticed, and we're actually quite successful here. The Tiger stops just out of the line of sight of my Sherman, so they can't see each other. That's useful. It contents itself just killing our repair crews near the tank factory, and during that time we put together this anti-tank gun, which can quickly turn around and get into range of the Tiger. Handily, it slightly outranges the Tiger, so it can fire at the thing while not being fired back upon. We can also load up the armor-piercing ammunition in our big gun Sherman. We do get a flanking shot on the Tiger when it decides to leave, but it doesn't do any damage, and the anti-tank gun misses. So not much came of that. It destroyed a bit of our base, blew up our half-track or something, killed some infantry. Not too bad, now we have more time to prepare. So a few minutes later, it returns with a panzer escort. I've put some mines down, you can just barely see them here. And it really looks like the AI can see those mines. It's kind of driving around where they were. Fortunately, the hitbox on the mines is much bigger than it's supposed to be by the looks of things. They don't actually drive over them, but they just detonate. It takes out a panzer and immobilizes the Tiger. So now it's actually stuck there. We've even done a tiny bit of damage to it. Now we can very slowly fire away with the anti-tank gun, and this does do something sometimes. I thought there was a deterministic aspect to this, in that if the anti-tank gun can't penetrate the Tiger's armor, it will never do damage, but sometimes it does, so there's an RNG aspect to attacking armor, and since the Tiger can't move, we can just sit here for a long time and we might eventually kill it. I did want to be a bit more proactive. I was going to try and outflank it with another big gun Sherman, but the Tiger's turret rotates faster than I was driving, so we just die instantly, and the big gun Sherman also can't really damage the Tiger. Here we are a bit later, another panzer showed up and managed to die on our minefield. We've got the Tiger's health down. What eventually finishes it off is a mortar strike to the roof that takes off the last like 20% of its health. Surprisingly powerful, because mortars really suck against Panzer IVs. They appear to do much more damage against the Tiger. I think the Tiger might have been given that as a weakness, so it's weak against something in the game at least. Well, that completes the mission, and we didn't even look at most of the map there. That was good. And now we move into what is actually the final mission, little did I know. Another slightly interesting one. It is another nightmare advance, but all you have to do is advance to the other side of the map where your allied base is. You don't have to capture the whole map. Although in practice, maybe you do, as we'll actually see. There are 4 bridges to capture to cut off an enemy retreat. We take the first one, easy enough since it was right next to our base. There's also a time limit. We have 1 hour max to complete this mission. I'm sort of in favour of time limits because I want the mission to be designed in such a way that it can be completed in less than an hour, ideally, since many of the stages in this game so far have taken longer than that, although that's probably the mod's fault as usual. I had difficulty advancing though, because there are stationary machine guns and anti-tank guns and tanks just everywhere. There are also mortar teams all over the place, so they can do the thing that I usually do to deal with the situation. I can't just sit back out of the enemy's line of sight and snipe them with my mortars, because they are actively moving up mortars themselves to do the same thing back to me. But more importantly, they are moving up tanks, and that's going to become the main problem in this mission. We get towards capturing the second bridge. I'm delayed here by the fact there's a machine gun in that building up ahead, so I need to get somebody to see it so a sniper can take them out. I've got 2 tanks trying to capture this bridge, a stationary enemy tank causes some damage, and there are also landmines all over this bridge, which I didn't realise at first. You can't see enemy landmines even if you've detected them with engineers, which I haven't in this case. I think you can see them in the base game, or the vanilla game, sorry, I seem to remember that is a feature. Whatever the case, we fail to capture that second bridge, and the enemy start making serious attacks on our base. They've got these upgraded Panzer IVs with armor-piercing ammo of some kind and extra side-skirt armor. As you can see there, they straight up destroy an anti-tank gun head-on. They have a really good anti-infantry weapon upgrade by the looks of things. They can annihilate all infantry, including anti-tank gun crews. So we don't do very well in stopping them, and they're going to start damaging our base. I think I spat out some more tanks and rocket launcher infantry to deal with them for now. I'm trying to repair up our little situation at the second bridge. We've actually captured the point using a sniper that wasn't visible to the enemy machine gun crew nearby. So we've done half of the progress towards the end of the mission in good time, but we're not in a very good situation. There you can see after I repaired a tank, it moved about 1 foot and then got immobilized again because it is parked in a minefield that we can't really see. So that tank's going to be there for the whole mission, really. We need to advance to the northeast. I'm trying to advance up the right-hand side of the river because it's a bit less under enemy control, but this doesn't really help me out very much because I don't really have the micro to do an advance, or the units. Here's what's happening in our base, and this is the reason for that. The enemy's tanks just kept coming. They are pumping these Panzer IVs out all over the place, and they take out our tank production building. Although we had just managed to build our sort of super tank, the Jumbo Sherman, not quite a Pershing, but it's a Sherman that has massive armor and doesn't always take damage when the Panzer IVs attack it, so it's really good for that. It's actually fighting 3 or 4 Panzer IVs right now, including one that's clipped inside it. It's got its rear armor facing the enemy, and it's somehow still alive, so that's how good this thing is. It actually sort of fights the enemy off. We take out a couple of the Panzers and then the other ones just drive off. But the reason they eventually drive off is that they take out all of the buildings in our base, so I guess that changes the AI. Now they don't really need to do anything here. Our HQ is dead, that means we can't make engineers to get new buildings, and we're sort of in a bit of a pickle. We've taken out the tanks at least. We did have some engineers alive somewhere on the map, and I brought them back to start remaking my base. So we are not out of this, but this is going to inflict a severe delay, and during that delay, of course, the enemy will be making more of those tanks. So we're just falling further and further behind. We can't get many resources because we can't capture map control. There's a mortar team somewhere firing at this half-track by the looks of things. We've still got our pop cap being wasted by an immobilized tank just stuck on the bridge not doing anything. A bit later, a different immobilized tank is stuck on the bridge not doing anything. Here was my eventual gambit. After remaking my tank depot, we've unlocked the Pershing, the ultimate unit for our side. So I just built one and tried to rush it towards the other end of the map to see what I could do. In the meantime, another anti-tank gun lost to a direct frontal attack by the enemy. They even had their flank exposed to us and we couldn't bring them down. So we are struggling to defend our base. But the Pershing makes some good progress, supported by the Jumbo Sherman. We start clearing out a whole bunch of the stationary positions that are between us and vaguely where the enemy's base is. We're actually being fired at here by an anti-tank gun, but the Pershing can deflect them on its front armour. So the jumbo Sherman now pulls this cheeky manoeuvre. It reverses its rear armour towards the anti-tank gun, just out of its arc of fire, and then parks up behind it to take it out. It's not a foolproof plan. We have lost a bunch of health on the Pershing. My objective was to get some engineers to run after the Pershing and fix it as it went, but now it's sort of out of range for that. There's tons of enemies between us and where the Pershing is. Well, anyway, we've started discovering the enemy's base, and of course if we can take out some of their base buildings like they did to us, we might have a reprieve, although we're pretty late in the mission now, so it's becoming less and less useful to do that. We do lose the Pershing eventually. I think a Panzer IV gets a lucky hit and takes it out, then our jumbo Sherman returns the favour. They've got Panthers spawning on that road just behind us as well, so we're in a bit of trouble there. Need to drive away from that. They have an unlimited supply of Panthers and Stugs, I think, that were spawning to represent the army we're supposed to be cutting off. I got to the end of the commander tree upgrades for tanks. This allows me to spawn the Pershing Ace, and this guy drives all the way across the map and makes it into the enemy base, taking out many tanks along the way and not taking any damage. So now we're in business. The only problem is there are only 10 minutes left now, and it also takes quite a long time for a Pershing to defeat a building because it's more of an anti-tank thing. It doesn't have high explosive rounds. Although you can see it's very good as an anti-tank thing. We take out multiple enemy vehicles here without really breaking a sweat, not taking any damage, even defeating a Panther on its front armor by just shooting straight at it. That's the stuff we like to see. However, I then just restarted the mission because I'd got my plan in order. We needed the time to do it, so we're back at the start, and you saw me there having a sniper gradually sneak out of my base right at the very beginning. This is the crux of my new plan. We need to attack their base as early as possible, but with the map absolutely crawling with anti-tank guns and heavy machine guns, we won't be able to just attack them, and it takes a long time to build up the XP to recruit jumbo Shermans and Pershings. So what we need is to be able to see the enemy base and recruit units in their base. And if you've been paying attention, there is a way for us to do that, so let's give it a go. The only thing is the sniper needs to make it without being detected. We need to get line of sight inside that base. And it is possible for the enemy to see a sniper, even if you have them in invisibility mode where they can't really do anything or move very fast. So the first sniper does unfortunately not make it. However, the game gives you 2, which is lucky because I'm not able to recruit snipers for whatever reason in this mission. I think because the pop cap for snipers specifically might be 1, so as long as you have 1, you can't make another one. Anyway, the second sniper sets off. Essentially, we just have to find a route that doesn't go really close to any of the enemy's static units, and be lucky that their mobile units don't happen to walk past where the sniper is, using a tank as a distraction I guess there and getting immediately destroyed. Well, it goes pretty well. We end up getting close to the enemy base. We can't completely focus on the micro there, because we are already under attack at our base. I'm being pretty careful and conservative back here, mainly just setting up defenses in a ring around our buildings, getting the anti-tank infantry out early to take out the first panzers that show up. They're actually Panzer IIIs, by the way. I kept saying they were Panzer IVs. They're just an upgraded Panzer III in some fashion. Well, they're here, and they are causing a nuisance. You can see I tried to push ever so slightly out of my base and was immediately punished for that. We need more stuff here, but I need to leave some of my pop cap open so that I can do my airborne strategy, which then might allow me to move without being hammered by the enemy traffic coming the other way. Well, we do get up to the enemy base, or the extremities of it, and I drop this airborne unit to start trying to damage buildings. Their regular attacks don't do anything, but we can throw out the timed explosives, which do some damage. We then have to wait for it to recharge, and you have to spend munitions to do this, but it's a good idea. The downside is that the enemy are still producing those panzers right in front of us. They've also got a half-track here, and our airborne squad doesn't last all that long, being completely annihilated from multiple sides. The idea was there though, so next I dropped down the airborne ranger squad, a slightly more elite infantry unit, this time right at the edge of the map and enclosed by these buildings, so it's hard for the enemy to see these guys, but they can gradually blow up this panzer factory. So we do the same thing as before, and make some progress, this time much more successfully because nothing's counter-attacking. Or are they? We're actually being fired at by a mortar half-track, but while the panzer building was there, we were kind of in its shadow, so it couldn't really hit us, and we got away with it. Looks like my Sherman there is getting away with being surrounded by enemy tanks, but they can't see it for whatever reason. It's sort of difficult to do this micro at the back and control the main mission in the base, but it goes pretty well. We take out the Panzer factory and half kill another one in the field nearby, but the mortar truck then finally gets a good hit and wipes our squad out. I just built another squad back here because the sniper is still hidden in the corner somewhere. I was determined to take out this second factory, the heavy Panzer factory, actually a different building to the one earlier. Surprisingly, it's the lesser of the Panzer factories that was giving us the troublesome Panzer III upgraded versions. Well, elsewhere, I'm gradually advancing along the left side of the map this time, going in the opposite direction to where I went the previous time, thinking it might be a bit easier, and it does leave us less exposed to being outflanked because the enemy's reinforcements are mainly spawning from our left, so kind of creeping towards them has a smaller border for us to contest, if that makes any sense. Well, looks like the landmines are still giving me some trouble. That tiny advance is punished heavily as well. We still need to do the Nightmare Advanced portion of this mission, but it is really much easier without being counterattacked all the time, and we have achieved our goal there. Some of the airborne even survived, and they're making a new base up in the top corner of the map. That's completely pointless, but it did feel pretty cheeky as I wanted to do it anyway. We've also got a howitzer out, so we're going to do the classic steady and slow advance using howitzers and mortars to clear out buildings and emplacements or just tanks that aren't moving. You can shoot them with the howitzer from afar. We can also use our planes. Because we're going down the aerial route, we can unlock recon planes and bombers. This is a similar deal to that thing I did with the Nebelwerfer batteries a while back. We get temporary line of sight on their base and then bomb it and take out a couple of buildings, or one building there. So we can use that to further hamper their production. I think they were just making half tracks at this stage, but that's still annoying because they can just come in and wipe out infantry units. We end up with this pretty solid left flank defensive position with a couple of anti-tank guys in a building covering the road where some of the enemy units were spawning and where some of the units from their base were coming down from, plus a heavy machine gun position to further reinforce it. I even sent airborne infantry to reinforce our allies' base because our allies were actually getting a little bit annihilated over there, and I guessed you had to keep them alive, although I'm not quite sure about that. In the meantime, we've got enough munitions to do this again. It's very expensive to do this recon and bombing run combo, so we can't do it very much, but now and again it's handy and it has permanent damage, or long-term damage I should say. The enemy can put their buildings back, as we'll see. It just tends not to, which is generous of them. Our base is also under attack by this mortar team that's roaming around. As mentioned before, they kept doing this, sending mortar teams to attack our fringes. Sometimes they show up in our base and start killing my buildings, and I don't notice. Luckily in that case I did notice, but we did take a lot of damage to that sort of attack. We need to use this howitzer here to blow up a building in the fog of war. I'd already gone out with a tank destroyer and spotted various buildings with heavy machine guns in them, so now we're doing the slow work of trying to clear some space. When it's a bunker with just regular infantry, we can actually do the classic charge tactic. You just run at them with a flamethrower guy and take it out. Using a grenade works too. This is very vanilla. That's how the game's supposed to work normally, but you can also do that against heavy machine guns as well. Well, it works here against those rifle infantry, which finally clears the road to the third bridge for us. We're also under attack at our base up at the top of the map. A nice distraction, please. So here's that third bridge. I'm sprinting across with some airborne, kind of just to see what we're working with here. There's tons of stuff back here. They've got an anti-tank gun and 4 or 5 machine gun squads. There's a sniper, a mortar team. It's all good back here. The fourth bridge is also really close, so capturing this area will effectively secure us the map. But actually getting in here will be difficult. I wanted to, at the last second, bring down a plane to take out some of their emplaced stuff, but we were slightly too late and our guys forgot where they were, so that's the end of that dream. Well, now we know it's mainly anti-infantry stuff and 1 anti-tank gun, so maybe a tank attack is in order. Here comes a Sherman crocodile that I had intended to use for that purpose. We finally unlocked our nice anti-infantry and anti-building tank option. Had a mortar team in our base to deal with first, but that Sherman didn't get very far, unfortunately, as we'll see. We're back at it again, destroying some more buildings in the enemy base. So yes, they're putting their buildings back, slowly but surely. And there is a build order, so if we keep destroying their low-level barracks, they're never able to build the Panzer factory. You have to build things in a certain order. Therefore, by keeping on top of that, we still aren't being harassed by those Panzer IIIs anymore. There was the Sherman crocodile for a moment. It's on fire on the third bridge, so that attack plan didn't work. With some desperate micro in between the enemy attacks, we do take out their buildings back in their base, so that's something. Here's another run and gun plan where I sneak up to get some line of sight on stuff and just see what I can do. With my relatively disposable airborne units, they just come back down from the sky. If they die, we can always get another one of those guys. Unfortunately, my strafing run doesn't take out the anti-tank gun like I wanted to there. My response to this was to be like, well, maybe we can just get through this without being killed by the anti-tank gun, because everything else would be vulnerable to a tank with some anti-infantry capabilities, and a regular Sherman with the 50 cal upgrade will slowly kill infantry units. So we park up and start taking out machine guns and that sniper and the like, and we're not quite in range of the anti-tank gun, I guess. And as usual, the AI doesn't want to move it, the crutch we're relying on. I was going to outflank the anti-tank gun, but there was a tank behind it. That's the issue why you can't outflank most things, like the bunkers earlier, for example. There's always just something else behind it on a map that's full of static enemy units. Good defense in depth from the AI, but annoying to deal with. I end up charging some infantry through the mess and cheekily capturing the 4th bridge temporarily. I thought that might end the mission, but no, we still have to secure some of the nearby territory points to have continuous territory up to our allies' base. There's actually a tiger nearby, and the 3rd bridge is under HMG fire, so we don't really have this area very secured. It's actually swarming with enemy units, but I do capture this point near our allies' base, and that is enough to link our territory, completing the objective and stopping the time limit. It's actually not the end of the mission, but it's the end of the timed part of the mission. Therefore, we're in the clear now. The next part is to take out essentially everything that's still on the map. But the good news is they come towards us, they're counter-attacking, so we're sort of on the defensive here. This infantry block is going to be cleared out by a strafing run. They've got loads of tanks coming in from the left again, from where they were reinforcing before. But we can once again rely on the fact we have our anti-tank position set up here. Just 2 anti-tank guys in a building, and you can see the massive number of tank wrecks next to this building. This unit has got extreme value, and the HMG nest nearby is keeping the enemy's infantry away by suppressing them. We do also have an anti-tank gun here that's not only doing some damage, but is drawing aggro away from the building as well, which is quite useful. Even the enemy's Tiger down there almost gets destroyed as it drives past our 2 anti-tank guys. Here's the remnant of that Tiger attacking another one of our positions. I say attacking, just driving through it. Another case, I think, where they were scripted to go somewhere in particular and maybe attack things on the way. They lost their main gun and got blown up by one of those sock bombs in the end. Here comes another Tiger, again attacking our anti-tank position, so that's kind of them. This Tiger proves to be much weaker than the one we had to deal with before. It seems our regular anti-tank guys can take out not only this Tiger, but the Panther that's inside it, the Tiger-Panther combo, a real super tank. Essentially, the lesson we've learned by the end of the game now is that tanks with gigantic guns aren't that good against tanks, but guys with quite small guns can be. Those rocket launchers are very powerful in the balancing, it seems. So anti-tank infantry was the way to go all along, really, when dealing with tanks, and the fact I kept trying to build my own tanks to contest with them was a red herring. Well, we've perhaps learned that lesson at the last possible moment, because here's the end of the game. We have taken out a whole bunch of Germans. This was supposed to be like their main army retreating from France. The cutscene before this mission was like, if we win here, we've won the war. Well, that aged poorly, I guess. It sort of doesn't feel like much of an ending plot-wise, because while we may have captured many enemy legs and we've reconciled with the mysterious missing texture beast, there is still quite a lot of World War II that happened after this, but I guess this is as far as they made the game. So for now, we've won, even though I'm pretty sure our company and these characters were probably made to fight a whole bunch more after this. The good news is that Captain Nobody is still alive. I think this is the original Nobody model we saw. Well, he's still going strong. They're annoyed about something or other. The other guys are just drinking while they're watching the prisoners. But, indeed, the real treasure was the friends you made along the way. In this case, the friends being an error monster and various pairs of legs. It wouldn't be a relic game without a real treasure was the friends you made along the way ending. That seems to be the trend I've seen so far playing their games. Anyway, the game actually crashed during the cutscene. I wanted to see if it registered that I'd completed that mission. It did, and there isn't another one. That's how I found out it was the end of the game, essentially. So we're done. We have played Company of Heroes with the Blitzkrieg mod as well. Some people in the forums, when I was originally looking for this mod, said that it either didn't work with the campaign or that the campaign was too hard because of the ways the mod changed the balancing of the game. Well, there you go, it was possible. and while I was here, I bothered to click on things, yet again some late game bothering to click on things action here on the Offid Game Grounds channel, and I discovered that was just a fraction of this game. There's tons of other stuff. In my memory, what we just played was the game, and I hadn't even completed that before. There's a whole bunch of other campaigns. I think they might have been DLC or something, and this is the complete edition of the game. But there was loads more. Who knows how much content this actually is, and some of it might even be added by the mod for all I know. Well, I decided not to play any of it even though I kind of wanted to, and that is because I did actually enjoy this game despite having just made a 2-hour video where I complained about it quite a lot. It otherwise was quite fun and memorable. I liked the bits that I liked. I thought the bits that I didn't like were okay. While I'm moaning about them, they were just boring rather than bad, I guess. The main complaint is just that there are breaks in the action, big periods of downtime, that make me want to really not lose a unit so I don't experience the downtime of having to get my guys back. But then having to not lose units means you have to play very slowly and carefully as well, which also makes things take forever. I think the easiest change that I could suggest to this game that might actually wipe out all of my complaints is to just increase the pop cap. This could be something to do with the Blitzkrieg mod, increasing the pop space needed for units or something. I always felt like I needed more units to do things, and if I'd had more units, taking losses, like in a battle, would be less of an issue. Like as it stands, if you lose a tank, you might lose 5 minutes of your life to that mishap, and you have to go back and try to get it again because you need it. But if you say had 3 tanks, one of them probably wouldn't be in line of sight. It would just be doing something at the back, turning around, getting glitched on terrain, all the good stuff. You could bring that guy up and try to use it to continue your advance, which of course the enemy AI can do because the map is covered in their units, but all the ones that are spawned at the start of the mission don't count towards their pop cap. So there's plenty of enemies to fight. Why not let us spam some stuff as well? I don't mind if it adds extra micro, because I wanted to do more stuff and not less stuff in all of that downtime. Plus it would give you the ability to defend areas, which was another thing I was a bit sort of on the fence about. You often can't leave units to defend your base. We saw in that last mission that you either defend your base or you leave. If you leave with enough units to push out, something can attack your base. I guess it's supposed to be like that, but I didn't want it to be. Well, there you go, there are my complaints, but overall, I actually thought it was good. It was probably pretty hard to tell. I enjoyed playing the Company of Heroes Blitzkrieg mod, apart from the small bits that I didn't enjoy. And I totally would play the rest if I hadn't been distracted by downloading a different game, starting to play that, and realizing I liked it even more. So that's a hint, I guess, about what I'm going to be playing next on Offid's Gaming Grounds. I'm playing an even older strategy game that I sort of knew existed and I had played before, but I'd completely forgotten how good it was. I'm not going to spoil anything else. Come back sometime soon to see a commentary of a game that I think is good, based on the start of it at least, and it's quite entertaining and special overall. Thanks for watching this video. See you next time.